Morning. Please settle down as we begin in 5 minutes.
twin goals of the local government code. One was really improving service delivery, therefore improving the quality of lives of people. If you devolve responsibilities and corresponding authority to local governments, we've seen local governments became more responsible, became more innovative on managing the affairs of local communities. The LG Code was really the policy framework for empowerment of local communities and local governments. For me, every Filipino deserves a minimum set of services. So full devolution will bring greater responsibilities to local governments. They will be fully accountable for service delivery, but they have all the needed resources, the wherewithal to steer development, define the destiny of their communities, green for their communities, and realize those dreams.
The local government code enacted in 1991 was really considered, in fact is considered, as the Bible of local governments in the country today. Our vision should not only be the vision of the leader, but it should be a shared vision of the leader and the constituency. Most important part here is engagement with the community, the dialogues between people. If we are open to learn from our successes and learn from our mistakes, we are in for a great adventure in governance. I always consider governance as an opportunity. It allows you to know your limitations and your strengths. I encourage everyone, give your best foot forward in helping our country through a strong local government.
Una-una sa local government code, binigyan ng power ang isang city for taxation. Then we do innovation on this. Dito kami gumawa at ang mga mayor namin ng mga programa, una para patapalakasin ang kita ng isang syudad. We lay our cards on the table. Ibig sabihin, kung gagawa kami ng isang programa, dapat alam ng mga kasama namin, mga constituent namin, para hindi kami magkamali. Sa lahat ng nilahad kong programa, sinasabi namin sa mga tao yan. Lahat dapat pakinggan, lahat dapat malaman.
We consider the code not just as a legal instrument, it's a blueprint of development for the country, and we believe that the code will actually facilitate, it will ensure genuine development to the country. If we are to harmonize, we have to ensure that these captive interventions are available, the captive interventions are accessible, and the captive interventions are in quality condition, ensuring that local government units will use the resources efficiently in order to improve the performance. And of course, part of the process is ensuring the local government academy will regularly assess the capacities of local government units. A lot of our local government are development-oriented already. So we are assured that this country will be brought to a future that will really be good for, especially for the younger generation today. So to all our local government units, our local government officials, this is a journey of a lifetime. The dream, the spirit behind the local government code is being actualized, will be actualized in 2022. We're preparing actually. This is an opportunity for us to better serve our constituents with the resources and the responsibilities that will be transferred to you. And I know with the types of leaders that we have now, that spirit of the local government code will actually be accomplished. So to all our local government officials, we are behind you. The Local Government Academy is always behind you in your capacity development requirements, and also we trust that together we can actually achieve this dream of a lifetime of local government units to really serve their constituent better.
All right, so good morning po everyone and welcome to our activity. So before we begin po, a few reminders. So please mute your microphone and turn on your video. So to time in or time out po, to time in po ngayon, just access the Google Drive link natin, http://bit.ly attendance mdm_eoc or scan lang po natin itong QR code na nasa screen. And for easier identification, please rename your username using the format. So for individual viewing, the LGU or office underscore your full name. So the example is Puerto Galera underscore Juan de la Cruz. And for group viewing, GV underscore LGU slash office. So example is GV underscore LGU Santa Fe. So to start, may we invite everyone to please settle down and feel the presence of the Lord as we lead this activity with a prayer to be led by Miss Ivy Dayan Piramide.
So good morning po sa ating lahat. Let us all bow our heads and put ourselves in the holy presence of the Lord. Dear God, thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. We are truly grateful for them. We also lift up to you the Mimaropans affected by the Typhoon Quinta. May they draw strength from you as they go through this difficult time. May you extend your divine wisdom to our speakers so that they would be able to impart effectively their God given knowledge to all of us. May they be blessed as they continue to bring their expertise to people who need them. Bless the participants as well so that they would be able to glean the vital information from this activity. May you bestow your blessings after this orientation so that we may go out and spread what we have learned in the spirit of your love and generosity. May we realize that this activity should glorify your name. Amen.
Thank you, Miss Ivy. And now, of course, we would like to acknowledge the participants here with us today. So may we have the Division Chief of the Local Government Capacity Development Division, none other than Chief Maria Teresita G. Iglesia. Ma'am?
Hello, thank you, Rayan.
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
coming in loud and clear?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Okay, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. So, isiningit na po natin itong activity na ito. Alam po namin na medyo busy pa kayo for the activities after the Quinta, pero ayaw na po natin abutin pa tayo ni Rolly at saka ni Shoni. Kaya isiningit na po namin talaga itong 2 araw nating pagsasanay. So, tingnan po natin who's on the board today. Andito po ba ang ating mga DPMAT members are at the regional office? Ang ating pong Disaster Preparedness Management Action Team members, Baka pwede pong magkaway-kaway tayo. Thumbs up. Are they there? So we also have today our members of the Regional Disaster Risk Reduction Management Committee. Andito rin po sila, ang ating mga kapartner po ng iba't ibang national government agencies and lahat ng members po ng RDRRMC. Good morning po. And dahil medyo may problema sa connection ng Marinduque, they are on YouTube. The MLGOs and other representatives of the province of Marinduque, they are all at YouTube. And hopefully po makapasok din kayo kung okay na yung connection. We also have from the province of Occidental Mindoro, the ILG Provincial Office and our LDRRMOs. Sana nandyan din po tayo. Our chairperson and the LDRRMOs of our LGUs. We also have our representatives from Oriental Mindoro. Dito po ba sila? Ayan. So for Occidental Mindoro po, I could see meron silang group view, naka-group view po sila. Ayan, andyan din po sila. Do have our participants from the province of Romblon. I could see sa provincial office, nandito po sila. I hope po yung mga iba na expected participants ay nandito rin. Kindly rename po accordingly yung ating mga names so that we can identify kung saan po kayong probinsya. And also, we also have participants from the province of Palawan. Ayan po. At syempre po, yung ating pong mga kasama din sa Puerto Princesa City. I hope na nandito na po sila sa Zoom, if not, sa ating pong YouTube channel. So, as of this moment po, I can see 66 participants on the Zoom and about less than 20 participants at YouTube. Pero dun sa 66 participants pong yan, ay meron pong mga group viewing. So we have yet to see kung ilan po yung actual attendance. Kindly fill up po yung ating attendance sheet kung hindi pa po kayo pag-attendance. And so of course, we also have our resource person. Kanina ko pa po nakita ang ating pong resource person, our director of the DILG, Central Office Disaster Information Coordinating Center, or what we call CODIX. We have Director Alan Tabel. Andito na po siya. Good morning, sir. And siguro po kasama na rin niya yung isa pa nating resource person, si Mr. Robin Lim. So, as we progress po sa maghapong ito at saka bukas, we hope that we could have more participants for this 1.5 day training on MDM, Emergency Operations Center, and Listo for Listo protocols for the management of emerging infectious disease. So, magandang araw po at welcome kayo po dito sa ating pong activity today. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you rin po, ma'am. So, once again nga po, welcome sa ating orientation on the management of the dead and missing persons, or MDM, the Emergency Operations Center, EOC, and the Operation Listo protocols for the management of emerging infectious diseases. So, without further ado, may we hear po some words of wisdom the welcome remarks from the father of the ILG Mimaropa, R.D. Wilhelm Suiko, Sesofor. Sir? And so we might be having technical difficulties po ano. And so we've received information that our regional director cannot give the message. Hindi po siya makapasok sa ating Zoom. So let's just move on po dun sa ating overview, and then once na nakapasok po siya, he'll give his message later. So to give us the overview of our activity, we have Miss Sydney Pamela Bihasa, the regional focal person for the MDM.
Alright, so magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. And again, welcome sa ating orientation on the management of the dead and missing persons, EOC and Operation Listo protocols for the management of emerging infectious diseases. So as a brief overview of our activity, we have actually planned for two separate MDM training activities for this year. One is for the RDRRMC member agencies as a coaches training, and the other is an executive course for our LDRRMC chairpersons and LDRRMOs. Unfortunately, ayun nga po, this pandemic happened, which made us replan and realign our activities. And now we have this online orientation. This is in fact the first DRRCCA webinar series spearheaded by our office. The next will be an internal activity, a series of learning activities for the formulation of our public service continuity plan. Based on the activity title, this two-day, half-day, if I may emphasize, will focus on three major DRR CCA concerns. So first we have, for our first session, we'll discuss the NDRRMC MC number 19 series of 2016 on the rules and regulations governing the implementation of the management of the dead and missing persons. Afterwards, we will zero in the pertinent issuances of the management of human remains for PUIs and confirmed COVID-19 cases. So pagkatapos po nun, yun yung ating day 1. Pagkatapos nun, sa day 2 natin, we'll take off the discussion on the overview of the Emergency Operations Center. So correct me if I'm wrong po sa ating mga kasama dito sa OCD na isa pa lamang yung batch at the regional level na nakapag-conduct tayo ng training para dun sa Emergency Operations Center. But I know for a fact na ating mga provinces like Marinduque, nakapag-roll out na rin sila no Emergency Operations Center. So shout out po, binabati ko rin yung aking mga kabatch dun sa EOC Alta. And then for our last session, we will be officially launching dito po sa ating region Mimaropa, the newest addition to the flagship program of our department on DRRCCA, the Operation Listo for MEID. We have already disseminated e-copies of the said protocol, but this time, we will look into the salient features of the said protocol. Another reminder, so please mute your microphone and turn on your video. Again, the attendance link is flashed on the screen, and for easier identification, please follow the format for renaming. Also, the presentation copy will be provided at the end of the training program. So hindi nyo na po kailangan na mag-screen cap. We will provide you the copies and the videos to be used in this training program. Also, with the recent onslaught of Typhoon Quinta hitting many areas in the region, we have decided to modify some training arrangement to still accommodate the confirmed participants who cannot at the moment join us in this live session, of course, due to power blackout in their respective LGU. Gusto ko rin po ipaalam na ang ating activity is currently being streamed on YouTube. So they can watch the recorded stream session. So tandaan po natin itong time na ito from October 31 to November 9, 2020. So to receive certificate of completion para sa nagpa-participate po ngayon sa live at yung magpa-participate sa via YouTube, ayan. So kailangan po natin una i-accomplish yung ating online attendance form. So time in and time out, time in sa umaga, then time out po sa tanghali for 2 days. Yung ating attendance link po were flash at nasa ating chat box na rin naman po for 2 days. The participants, yung ating po mga mag-view from YouTube, the participants may opt to finish the session for 1 full day. But time in and time out for 2 days is still required. Through the same link na naka-flash po kanina at saka dun sa ating chat box, ang ating pong mga participants are required to accomplish post-activity and resource persons post-evaluation client satisfaction survey forms. And ito po yung siguro yung pinakamahalaga na gusto natin i-emphasize dahil nga tayo ay apart from the live session ay mag-asynchronous session, achieve an 80% or above post-test rating. So alam naman natin ng ating mga dream boys at mga dream girls na participants mo dito, sanay na dito sa requirement na ito. So 80% po noong ating pre-test. So kanina kung ating pre-test ay medyo nahirapan tayo, alam ko naman during the course of our discussion ay malalaman na rin natin kung anong tamang sagot sa mga questions sa ating pre-test. Ayan, so again, dahil ito nga pong ating activity ay DRRCCA, kaya yun po yung ating training requirements. And we would also like to request everyone to focus on the discussion and grasp the lessons the best way that we could. Lastly, ayan, kung meron po tayong katanungan, we can click po yung raise hand button. So makikita po natin dito sa participants sa lower right po ng inyong screen. Or pwede nyo rin pong i-chat. Kung kayo po ay medyo shy type, pwede po natin i-type sa chat box. Lagay lang po natin yung LGU natin and then yung ating pong question. So as mentioned nga po, we are also streaming live on YouTube. So kasamahan po natin sa YouTube. Magandang araw po. If you want to review the discussions, you can do so po by visiting our channel, DILG Mimaropa LGCDT. And while you are there, so paki-like and subscribe na rin naman po ng ating YouTube channel para rin po tayo ay maging updated sa mga upcoming CapDev activities ng DILG Mimaropa. And that's it for our overview, and I hope that all internal and external factors will be working on our favor. Pero bago po yun, Ma'am Ray, allow me rin po, pwede po ba tayo ay mag-open cam? Kasi sabi po nila mas fresh daw po ang mga participants kapag day 1. So can we open cam for some first, photo opportunity? So gusto po nating makita kung sino ba yung mga nandito nung day 1, tapos nawala na nung day 2. Ayan, so open cam po tayo. So first page muna po tayo dahil hindi po natin alam kung anong page natin. Ano na lang po, smile all the way. Alright, so page 1 muna po tayo. Smile, 1, 2, 3. Alright. Teka lang po Smile lang po. And then, page 2. Smile po tayo. Teka lang po, 1. Dito po nakasmile yung iba kaya hindi binabasa. Ayan, 1, 2, 3, smile. And then last page po tayo. 1, 2, 3, smile. Alright, so that's it. Over to you, Ma'am Ray.
Thank you, Ma'am Sid. Yan. So, habang fresh pa po tayo, mas maganda nga po talagang nakakuha na tayo ng ating photo. Now, of course, to hear a message from the Regional Director of DILG Mimaropa, may we have RD Wilhelm M. Suico, CESO4. Sir, good morning po. Sir, nakamute po kayo.
Okay, go.
Yes,
Dinig
sir.
na ako?
Yes, sir. Opo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mula po sa himpilan ng DILG Mimaropa dito po sa Quezon Avenue. Isa pong magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Sa mga participants, sa ating pong mga guests, ang Batman and Robin Tandem, ating pong mga resource speakers, si Engineer Alan Tabel, pati si Mr. Robin Lim, ating pong Assistant Regional Director, at KRD Ray Maranan, sa ating pong mga provincial directors, sa mga participants coming from the different parts of Mimaropa region, as far as Romblon, Marinduque, Palawan, and dalawang Mindoros. Magandang umaga po. Pasensya na po kasi I was naubusan po ako ng tubig dito. I was waiting na 9 o'clock pa naman magsimula ang program, pero nagsimula pala tayo ay before 9. Pasensya na po na hindi namin nalaman bakit naubusan palagi ng tubig dito sa office. Kaya pasensya na po. Anyway, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. It has been said na merong disasters bring out the best among us, di ba? So kung hindi po nagkakaroon ng disaster o calamity, ay minsan ay hindi po na i-discover ang hidden talents at saka yung ating resiliency as Filipinos. And because of this task ahead of us, we have the best in the department, the best people with us this morning. Tulad ni Engineer Alan Tabel at si Mr. Robin Lim. Alam mo po si Engineer Tabel po ay tagal ko na pong naging kasama po to. Nagsisimula po siya sa communications doon sa Office of Public Affairs ng DILG. Ako po ay isa pang Regional Information Officer. So ito po ay master po ni Engineer Tabel po yung communication systems. Sisimula pa kami noon sa mga CB radio, sa mga over ganun hanggang dumating po kami doon sa satellite telephone mobile phones during the mga kidnappings noon sa Basilan. We were provided with satellite phones at sila po nagmamanage. So ito po si Engineer Alan po, pati po si Mr. Lim, Robin Lim ay kasabihan pong pillars po natin sa ating pong mga importanteng programa po dito sa DILG. So ang management of the dead and the missing ay dati po ay para pong hindi po ito binibigyan ng pansin po na kung magkakaroon po ng disaster ay ang ating pong yung response, retrieval, rescue. But nung dumating po yung typhoon naranasan po natin yung Typhoon Undoy noong 2009, well, it was, hindi naman po ito ang pinakamalakas na bagyo na dumaan sa Pilipinas, pero in terms of destruction, kasi po ang sinalasa po ng bagyong Ondoy noong 2009 ay ito pong NCR at mga karatig bayan. So nakikita po na hindi po handa ang sambayanan ang dami pong many bodies are dead bodies thrown around. Nobody was taking care. No agency was assigned to take care of the missing and dead after the calamity. Mas lalo na po nang dumating yung Typhoon Yolanda. So hundreds of scores of dead bodies were strewn around, and no agency was assigned to do the task of retrieving at managing the dead and the missing. So after that, nagkaroon po in 2016 ang National Disaster ang DRMC, ay nagkaroon po ng tinatawag ng naglabas po ng Circular Number 19 ng 2016. At that po ay natasan po ang ating pong kagawaran na maging lead agency, particularly in the management of the dead and the missing. Under the National Disaster Rescue Plan, we have among the clusters there, ito pong MDM na isa pong binibigyan po natin ng pansin. At ito po, dahil po sa mga inisyatibo na ito ay kinilala po. Maya sasabihin sa atin ni Engineer Alan Tabel, nakilala po ang Pilipinas sa isa sa pinaka-aktibo sa Asia sa pagdating po sa management of the dead and the missing. Katanguna po tayo dito ay tayo po ay nakipagtulungan, nag-aral po tayo sa tulong po ng among the national the world organizations, sa International Red Cross, among others, to give us capacity in doing our job as managers of the dead and the missing persons. So we will, and with this ay napakaganda po ng ating dati po ay ang kurso po ng management of the dead and the missing persons ay nabibigay lang po sa mga piling tao at mga yung nakaka-afford pumunta kasi mahal po yung cost po ng pagpa-training. Pero napakaswerte po natin ngayon ay libre po ang training na ito kasi po ay through virtual teleconferencing. At saka ngayon po ay hindi tulad ng ibang trainings. Dati pag nagtitraining tayo, magpapa-register tayo, magmumuling tayo. Hindi na tayo pwede magmuling ngayon. Makikinig po tayo sa mga bibigay sa ating mga lectures at I will assure you na napaka-interesting at isasabihin yung magpapasalamat po kayo. Mabuhay po ang ating mga participants coming from the LGUs alongside with the DILG people. At of course, along with this ay ang ating pong kahandaan, ang Listo protocols during itong typhoons. Ito po ay medyo nabigyan po ng konting challenge sa atin kasi nasa gitna po tayo ng pandemic ng COVID-19. At ito ay hindi lang po iniwasan natin yung salanta po ng bagyo. Of course, yung risk involved amid the pandemic kasi hindi lang bagyo, ang baha, at pumakas sa mga pati itong infectious disease na ito ng COVID-19. So it will be a great challenge for us, and again, we hope that you all will be listening, and this will be a very fruitful session, 2 days for us. And again, magpapasalamat na po sa ating mga resource persons, kay Engineer Alan Tabel at saka kay Mr. Robin Vin. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sydney. Magandang umaga po.
Thank you so much po, RD, sa inyong heartwarming message. Yes po. Opo. So for our discussion, of course, nabanggit nga po ni Ms. Sydney kanina na we have our session 1 and session 2. So the session 1 is the NDRRMC Memorandum Circular number 19 series of 2016 on the rules and regulations governing the implementation of the management of the dead and missing persons. So for session 2, we have the management of human remains for PUIs and confirmed COVID-19 cases. So to give us the discussion of these topics, we have the Chief of the Codex or the Central Office Disaster Information Coordinating Center. We have Director Edgar Allan B. Tabel. Sir, welcome po. And
good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Daghang salamat. Thank you very much sa inyong lahat. Daghang salamat, RD Willie. I'm really happy to be here at your invitation, sir. It is my honor and privilege. Good morning din po kay ARD Ray Maranan at ang lahat ng miyembro ng DILG Mimaropa family. Hi everyone, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Thank you for inviting me to this very important activity to discuss the relevant policies, guidelines, and protocols in managing the remains of COVID-19 victims. So, coming in as the national lead coordinator of the MDM cluster of the NDRMC, I hope I'll be able to give you something new today. I have requested, before we go to the core of this presentation, please allow me a few moments to give you a glimpse of the NDRMC disaster response system, kung saan na napapaloob yung MDM cluster. Ano? And I have also requested the ILG Mimaropa to agree to merge sessions 1 and 2. Kasi I will only be doing a quick overview of the MDM cluster system and MC number 19 series of 2016. And we need more time to discuss the details of the management of the dead during COVID-19. So thank you again, the ILG Mimaropa, for considering our request. Okay, can I share my slide? Can you see my slide now?
Yes, sir. If you could just,
Yan.
switch to, yes, sir. Okay na po.
Yan, okay na? Clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so clear na, no? Sige. So if you may recall, in the aftermath of Typhoon Yolanda, NDRMC developed the National Disaster Response Plans. Ngayon, meron na tayong tatlong approved na National Disaster Response Plans, so NDRP. And these are the NDRP for hydromet hazards, the NDRP for geologic events, ito yung earthquake and tsunami. And yung pangatlo and pinaka-recent is the NDRP for the consequence management of terrorist events or terrorism events. And also during that time, this was already in the in the entire year of 2014 actually, NDRMC revamped the humanitarian cluster system. So there were 8 humanitarian clusters during Yolanda, and these were the United Nations humanitarian clusters that we used to have nung dumating yung Typhoon Yolanda sa atin. Pero nakita natin, one of the thousands of lessons that we learned from the management of the impacts of Typhoon Yolanda was that the 8 UN cluster systems were not enough. So after Yolanda, yun yung isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit ni-revamp ng NDRMC yung humanitarian cluster systems. And we came up with an additional 3 clusters. And ito yung law and order cluster, yung international humanitarian assistance cluster, at syempre yung management of the dead and missing clusters. On the screen is the slide where you're able to see the 11 disaster response clusters that we have today, and these are all reflected in the 3 national disaster response plans that we have. And yung management of the dead and missing is led by the DILG at the national level and the DILG field offices at the field levels, at the LGU level. So yun yung pag-usapan natin ngayon briefly, and then we will move on more specifically, more detailed doon sa management of the dead during this pandemic. Okay, so on May 13, 2016, NDRMC issued Memorandum Circular number 19 prescribing the rules and regulations governing the implementation of the management of the dead and missing persons in times of disasters. If you are interested of the details, because if I present in detail MC19, it will take us more than half a day. So kaya overview lang muna pag-usapan natin today, because I understand that all of us would really like to focus on managing the dead during this pandemic. So if you need more information about the prescriptions of MC19, please do get a copy. And you can get a copy, I know, from the nearest DILG officer sa inyo. It will always be best to have a copy of MC19 within reach whenever you need it. So management of the dead or management of dead bodies, and siyempre yung body parts, kasi how gruesome, even if it is gruesome to discuss, but this is reality. if you have been part of disaster response operations for landslides, you would probably have experienced na hindi na buong katawan yung nahuhukay nila during landslides, but body parts. And also during human-induced disasters like bombings. So hindi na rin buo-buo yung nare-retrieve na dead bodies, but also body parts. So this is a reality. And management of dead bodies and body parts is now considered a core component of disaster response. Ibig sabihin nito, there's a need to plan and plan ahead para ma-implement ng tama at maayos, together with search and rescue, together with caring for the survivors, yung tinatawag nating relief operation, disaster relief, no? And providing for the essential services, the basic services like food and water, like electricity and all of that. So dapat kasabay na siya because tama yung sinabi ni RD Willie earlier, in the past, yung management of the dead was not even considered as a priority. When I first became aware of management of the dead in 2013, right after Yolanda, the day after, actually, I was of the feeling, of the belief na last priority yan. Kasi I was trained to do triage, and yung black sa triage is really for the dead, and they don't have any priority actually because they're the last. But as I became more aware, became more educated in proper disaster response and in management of the dead, I realized, together with a lot of other disaster managers in our country, that management of the dead is and should be a core component of disaster response. Kaya ngayon, thanks to MC number 19, it is already part or a major part of our disaster response system. So yung dignified and proper management of dead bodies during disasters is basic, is fundamental, is kumbaga kasing halaga sa pagbibigay kaagad ng relief or in even doing search and rescue, di ba? Hindi siya yung panghuli na, kundi kasama na siya, kasabay na siya. And it also helps families, lalo na yung mga surviving members of the families, to learn of the fate of their loved ones. And kung halimbawang namatay, so that they will be able to mourn for them properly. Kung missing naman, then at least we'll be able to provide a little ray of hope kung merong chance na mahanap, whether patay or buhay. But, Filipinos, it's important for us, kahit alam nating namatay, it's really important for all of us to at least retrieve or recover the dead body, and so we can mourn the dead body of our relative properly. So yung MC19, if you have a copy now, you can check. Meron siyang 19 policy statements. It's very important. Yung 19 policy statements na yon is actually the core of MC19. And doon ang gagaling yung lahat ng mga ibang provisions, implementing provisions ng MC19 from the 19 policy statements. However, out of the 19, there are two policy statements that are very important as far as I'm concerned. And ito yung una, dead persons have the right to be found, retrieved, identified, and buried according to their religious and culturally acceptable norms. Mahalaga yun, lalo na sa atin sa Pilipinas, no? Na we're not composed of one race. We're actually multiracial, multidimensional ang kultura ng Pilipino. And we also have several religions that we have to respect, no? Yung religious practices and norms. And pangalawang pinakamahalagang policy ng MC19 for me is the inherent dignity of the dead shall be observed at all times. So I have, you cannot imagine, I saw thousands of pictures and hours of video footages of the damage that was wrought by Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. I was very unfortunate dahil, however, I tried at the time to be able to be allowed to deploy to the field. No, I asked specifically to be deployed in Samar, in Eastern Samar. I was not allowed to. So I had to contend with watching videos and a lot of pictures, and I saw practically thousands of dead bodies littered all over the place. Hindi na sila pinapansin, in fact. And then afterwards, 2 weeks later, when the then Secretary of the ALG, Marojas, came back to Manila, after his deployment in Tacloban. He was telling us a lot of stories about how dead bodies were not properly being cared for. So napakahalaga sa akin itong dalawang policy statements na ito. So this slide would show us the organizational structure of the MDM cluster. If you look at, there are 4 blocks in blue, and yung nasa pinaka left are blocks in white. Yung blocks in blue, it starts with disaster victim identification. That's the subcluster for DVI, and it is led by the National Bureau of Investigation in the aftermath of natural disasters. And then disaster victim identification is led by the PNP if it was a human-induced disaster. So by law, yun ang distinction. Kapag natural disaster, NBI ang lead sa disaster victim identification. At kapag man-made or human-induced ang disaster or incident, the PNP Crime Laboratory leads the DVI. And then the second subcluster is disposition of the dead. And then the third is management of missing persons, and the fourth, management of bereaved families. So nandiyan din nakasulat yung mga lead agencies sa bawat subcluster and the support agencies and organizations for each. No? Sa disposition of the dead, this is led by the DILG and the concerned LGU. Kung anong LGU yung affected, sila yung nagli-lead sa tactical, sa operational at tactical level. Sa management of missing persons, this is led by the concerned local PNP chief or PNP chief of police, no? Yung local police. And with the support, of course, of the SOCO, scene of the crime operations ng PNP. Usually, these are at the provincial PNP offices levels. And then yung management of bereaved families, again, this is led by the LGU through the local social welfare development office, pero under the supervision of the DSWD sa regional level. Yung white box, again, sinabi ko kanina, nasa pinaka-leftmost, this would represent the search and retrieval subcluster of the search, rescue, and retrieval cluster. And this is led by the armed forces of the Philippines. So if you look at the magkatabi yan, yung search and retrieval subcluster at saka yung DVI subcluster, that's because they need to work closely together to become effective. I'll explain in a while why. So makikita natin dyan sa slide na yan or sa diagram na yan na yung search and retrieval, which is under the SRR cluster, at yung DVI and management of missing persons under the MDM cluster meet. Kasi yung produkto, yung output ng search and retrieval, which is really searching for and retrieving dead bodies as a result of disaster, ay kailangang mapunta sa DVI. At yung produkto naman, at yung ginagawa ng DVI at yung management of the missing has also to be coordinated with search and retrievals. Halimbawa, may mga sinesearch sila, but they don't really know where and how, and they need information or intelligence. So yung management of missing persons in DVI will be the ones providing some, if not most, of the information to the search and retrieval. And kung ano man yung mariretrieve na dead bodies, yun naman yung matuturn over nila to DVI and management of missing persons. So ganun ka close yung interrelationship, working relationship between the search and retrieval cluster and DVI and management of missing persons subclusters naman sa atin. So ginagawa natin yung MDM. Well, also the diagram shows you that everything that we do in MDM is really for the benefit of the bereaved families. Diba? Parang may bracket kayo makikita dyan. Yung DVI, yung management of missing person, disposition of the dead. We're doing this not for the dead or, well, for the dead, but really we're doing all of these things mostly for the benefit of the bereaved families. Diba? So ginagawa natin ng tama yung MDM, hindi lamang para sa patay, hindi lamang para sa hustisya, hindi lamang para sa siyensya. Ginagawa natin ito para sa kapakanan ng mga nawalan ng mahal sa buhay, yung mga naulila. Diba? So kung ikaw ay isa sa mga biktima, halimbawa, biktima ng disaster, nasira ang bahay mo, malaking pinsala ang tinamo mo, nawawala ang iyong mga mahal sa buhay o nandyan siya, ngunit wala ng buhay. Ikaw mismo, hindi mo alam kung anong gagawin mo, di ba? Biktima ka ng disaster. Hindi ba ikaw, iisipin mo o aasahan mo ang gobyerno mo na sana merong sistema ang gobyerno, may sapat na kakayanan para tulungan ka, di ba? Our people would really expect government to have something that will help them make it through. Nasira yung bahay ko, namatay yung miyembro ng pamilya ko, nawawala yung ibang miyembro ng pamilya ko. Hindi ko kayang solusyonan yung kalagayan ko. So there has to be a system, there must be institutions or organizations within government that would be able to assist me, to give me help. Diba? Hindi lang sa search and retrieval, hindi lang sa DVI, hindi lang sa paghahanap ng mga nawawalang kamag-anak or paglibing ng mga na-retrieve na patay. But it's really all about helping me, the living survivor of the disaster who suffered all of this. Diba? So yun yung ibig sabihin doon. Yun yung konsepto. Yun ang essence or the spirit of management of the dead and missing. So for the details, again, like I said, get hold of the copy of MC number 19, series of 2016, kasi we will not have enough time to talk about that today. But more importantly, we need to talk about management of the dead in the context of the pandemic, in the context of COVID-19. Let me begin by saying, ang virus is not COVID-19. The virus is called SARS-CoV-2, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus Type 2. Kasi yung Type 1 was discovered, 2013? When the first SARS pandemic hit some parts of the world. COVID-19 is the Coronavirus Disease 2019. This is the name of the disease. Okay? Para lang malinaw, because I keep hearing, even sa simbahan, well, this morning I was hearing an abbreviated mass and sabi ng pare, the COVID-19 virus. So it's important to know, to distinguish which one is the name of the virus and which one is the name of the disease. Mahalaga yon, especially in management of the dead. And maybe you will understand why in the context of these presentations. So, yung pandemic is classified as a biological disaster. Okay, so to put it simply, or by definition, ang isang biological disaster is a natural disaster which involves disease, disability, or death on a large scale. So whether yung disease or disability or death pertains only to humans or pertains only to animals or plants. As long as yung cause nung biological disaster na yun or ng disaster na yun are viruses, bacteria, or toxins. So yun yung definition or understanding natin kung ano yung biological disaster. So as of ano ba ang data natin? I think we have close to 400,000 dead already declared by DOH, and with all the pagluluwag that we are seeing now, I won't be surprised that by the end of November, before the end of November, nasa mga kalahating milyon na ang positive cases sa Philippines. I'm telling you, I have seen analytics forecast that projects over 1 million already right now, over 1 million positive cases in the Philippines. So parang kulang pa rin yung testing natin, despite the fact that we are able to test already more than 60,000 a day all over the country. So, okay. So in sa National Task Force for COVID-19, merong sub-task unit for management of the dead. This is under the sub-task group governance, under naman sa task group response operations. So this slide will show you the critical tasks of the sub-task unit management of the dead. So ang trabaho ang critical task ng management of the dead sub-task unit ay itong mga nakasulat. Ensure that standard and transmission-based precautions and DOH recommended guidelines are followed, no? In the management of the dead. I will elaborate on some of these in a while, so let's not belabor the point. Sorry, let's not belabor these muna. Okay, so ituloy natin para mahimay natin siya ng mabuti. So all actions sa management of the dead during this pandemic, national or local, these are all guided by policies, guidelines, and recommendations. Una, from the Department of Health, yung kanilang DOH Department Memorandum number 2020-0067, issued on February 3, 2020. These are the guidelines on the disposal and shipment of the remains of confirmed COVID cases of 2019 nCoV ARD, or yung novel coronavirus acute respiratory disease. Pangalawa, yung IATF Resolution number 15, dated March 24, 2020. So as early as March, kasi yung pandemic, although while the start of the spread or yung recorded history kung kailan nag-umpisa yung sakit na ito, December 31, 2019, it came to the Philippines late January this year. It did not actually become an epidemic until late February. So more or less in a month's time or even less, IATF already was beginning to address the issue of how to manage dead bodies as a result of the pandemic, as a result of a biological disaster. Iba yung konsepto, iba yung pamamaraan sa pag-handle ng dead bodies kung biological disaster. Kasi merong yung hazard hindi nawawala at posibleng yung hazard nandoon sa katawan nung namatay. Hindi katulad ng mga namatay sa natural disasters where, siyempre, kung bagyo yon, nalunod, when you retrieve the dead body, wala na yung flood. Kung landslide man yon at nahukay yung katawan, na ialis na doon sa landslide zone or area, wala na yung hazard because you have brought the body elsewhere where it is safe. Pero sa isang biological disaster, at lalo na itong nangyayari ngayon sa COVID-19, kahit saan mo dalhin yung katawan, it's possible, it's highly possible that if the cause of death was SARS-CoV-2 or the virus, then kahit dalhin mo yung katawan sa isang safe na lugar, nandun pa rin yung hazard, nandun pa rin yung virus sa katawan, di ba? Until maybe after several hours or a couple of days, depende sa sitwasyon ng host, ng katawan. So, iba ang pamamaraan. There are already established procedures, yung tinatawag na standard precaution, at saka yung transmission-based precaution in handling contaminated dead bodies or contaminated human remains. So these are just some of the considerations why kailangan ng special attention or special treatment yung management of dead bodies during pandemic. The third policy document that was issued and which we in the MDM follow is the ILG Memorandum Circular number 2020-023. This was immediately after the IATF resolution was issued, but it does not mean na ura-urada yung paggawa ng the ILG-MC. In fact, even before the IATF resolution was passed, yung MDM cluster ng NDRMC and the ILG, which is led by the ILG anyway, started working on this document, itong MC 2020-063. Pero siyempre hindi namin to pwedeng ilabas at pangunahan yung IATF. So we had to wait for the IATF to approve that resolution before the Secretary signed MC 2020-063. So this was issued on 27 March. Ang tawag dito sa MC na ito ay the Interim Guidelines on the Management of Human Remains for Persons Under Investigation and Confirmed COVID-19 Cases. So at that time, well, even today, wala pang permanent or institutionalized guidelines for handling these human remains as a result of COVID-19. So lahat ng mga guidelines, lahat ng mga recommendations dito ay interim. Ibig sabihin, no, nag-evolve pa siya. From what we know up to that point, hanggang today, we're still discussing na totoo at tama yung provisions ng MC na yan. it means na hindi pa nakakahanap ang siyensya ng mas mabisang paraan or even safer means of implementing the management of human remains for PUIs and COVID-19 cases. So, interim, as we continue to encounter cases, as we continue to learn lessons, this MC will evolve together with the other guidelines from the DOH, from the World Health Organization, from the Pan American Health Organization, from the International Committee of the Red Cross, organizations which we actually work with para hindi tayo nahuhuli at hindi tayo nagkakamali, no, doon sa ating mga pinapatupad ng mga sistema. Pangapat na document is the DOH and DILG Joint Memorandum Circular Number 1 dated April 16, 2020. Ang tawag natin dito, ito yung supplementary guidelines to DILG MC 2020-063. Una, yung supplementary guidelines na ito are all based on existing laws, rules, and regulations. Kasama na dyan yung Sanitation Code of the Philippines, PD 853. But more so, kasi we realized after receiving several feedback doon sa MC 2020-063 that there were a lot of guide or provisions or regulations that must be disseminated, that must be included in the interim guidelines, but were not provided for under MC 2020-063. So kailangan niya ng supplementary guidelines, additional guidelines. So since we have been working together with DOH to prepare the ILG MC 2020-063, it was reasonable and logical to get the same team to work together to work on the supplementary guidelines. So lumabas yun noong April 16. So in practice, sa management of the dead, we follow the WHO's interim guidance on infection prevention and control for the safe management of a dead body in the context of COVID-19. We're also guided and we are supported by our partners from the International Committee of the Red Cross and of course the Philippine Red Cross. Since the day MDM the MDM cluster was activated for COVID-19 response, you see on the slide, dalawa pa lang yung subclusters that we have activated. If you are kayo na participants natin today, if you are trained in ICS or if you know ICS, alam nyo na sa ICS hindi natin ina-activate o hindi kailangang i-activate yung buong organization when you initiate a response operation. Pwede mo siyang palakihin, pwede mo siyang paliitin, depende sa pangangailangan. And in the case of management of the dead, we only need, as of today, we still only need to operationalize or activate 2 subclusters. At ito yung disposition of the dead at saka yung management of bereaved families. Medyo bilisan natin to kasi mahaba itong mga presentations natin. So, let's talk more specific about the ILG MC 2020-063. Maraming provisions dyan. Mahaba at mga importante lahat halos, no? For example, in handling human remains, kailangang maipatupad yung standard precautions at yung transmission-based precautions. At yung lahat ng DOH recommended guidelines and procedures, it has to be very strictly observed. Standard precautions and transmission-based precautions pertain to infection or sets of infection prevention and control protocols or practices that is used to ensure or to prevent transmission of diseases that can be acquired by contact of blood or body fluids or mucous membranes or anything na medyo basa sa katawan ng isang infected person. So kailangang masiguro may mga protocols, may mga regulasyon or proper procedure kung paano gagawin 'yon. Kasama na doon basic yung proper equipment. Okay? At siyempre kasama din doon yung proper doffing or yung pagtanggal, no? And disposal of these PPEs. Kasama doon sa standard precaution at saka transmission-based precautions. MC 2020-060 also reiterates the recommendations of the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization that the remains of COVID-19 cases ay pwedeng ilibing at pwede ding i-cremate. No? So, later practice na ginagawa natin para mas malinaw sa ating lahat. Alam nyo, nung umpisa, I think this was in April. This started in April or maybe, I think middle of April. Onset nung pandemic sa Pilipinas. There was a lot of confusion. There was some confusion among LGUs kung paano ilibing yung Muslim COVID-19 victim. Kung paano i-handle at kung paano ilibing. No? Because some sectors were calling immediately for the cremation of the human remains, the dead body of all COVID-19 victims sa takot no, na baka maka-infect yung katawan na yon kung hindi ka agad sunugin. But we know and we respect, di ba, yung principle na binanggit ko kanina, yung policy statement na yon, that we in MDM respect religious norms and cultural norms. And it's very important. It has to be always, we have to keep it in mind all the time to respect religious practices and religious beliefs and cultural norms. So Muslims sa Islam, bawal i-cremate yung human body, yung human remains. So kailangan mailibing. And they have a method, they have actually a ritual of cleansing a dead body before it is wrapped and buried on the ground or underneath the ground. So medyo mahirap, medyo complicated yung naging situation nila. And so we understood why some mayors, some communities even resisted na ilibing. Kasi nga takot nila baka kahit nasa ilalim na ng lupa, gagapang yung virus sa labas as if I don't know, our concept of the virus is gumagalaw yung virus, which is not true. Bacteria pwedeng gumalaw, but viruses hindi yung gumagalaw. Kaya kung ang tao hindi gagala, hindi din gagala yung virus. So people were of the belief na kapag nailibing sa ilalim ng lupa, gagapang yung virus pataas, palabas sa lupa, and then the viruses will infect the population, which is also, of course, not true. Diba? So because of the lack of knowledge, the misunderstandings or lack of understanding, nag-issue ang DILG ng MC 2020-063 at saka yung supplementary guidelines para ma-clarify ang lahat ng ito. Diba? So, we have also provide or MC 2020-060 also provides that burial, pero preferably cremation. Okay? So kung hindi ka Muslim, or if it's not against your culture and your religion to be cremated, sa Catholic Church kasi hindi bawal yung cremation because paniniwala ng mga Katoliko, from dust to dust. Diba? So galing ka sa alabok, babalik ka sa alabok. And it doesn't violate any religious belief to be cremated. So it becomes very practical. Also, because we don't want dead bodies to be to undergo vigil and wake. Di ba yung ating kultura sa Pilipinas na ibuburol sa bahay or somewhere else and people will come, we discourage doing that. Okay, ang dahilan for that is kung yung patay nasa loob ng kabaong namatay dahil sa COVID and then people gather around, some people believe na may infect yung mga tao ng virus na galing sa patay. Hindi po totoo yun. Kasi nawawala yung virus o nadi-disengage, nadi-deactivate yung virus actually within hours after wala nang buhay yung host. Because viruses thrive on hosts. Kapag patay na yung tao, after several hours, wala na yung protein, wala na yung fat, nadi-deactivate yung virus. Ang fear, ang ating iniiwasan actually during wake and vigils are people converging because one or more of those persons attending the wake or vigil could be a spreader. Diba? So yung mga taong pupunta doon, hahawak doon sa mga bagay-bagay. Alam niyo, pagka merong burol, di ba, hinahawakan natin yung kabaong, nagdadasal tayo. And then the next person comes along, hawakan yung kabaong, nagdadasal tayo. So this becomes an opportunity for the virus to be transmitted. So yun yung iniwasan nating opportunity. Hindi po yung ang patay na namatay dahil sa COVID ang makakahawa doon sa mga buhay na dadalo doon sa lamay. Hindi po yun. Yun pong opportunity for people to converge, which is why it doesn't have to be a lamay. Even in ordinary occasions where people gather, like birthday celebrations, binyag, and all of that, we discourage people from coming together in such large crowds because of that reason. Na yung mga tao na nag-gather together will create a super spreader event. Okay, so yun yung isa sa mga dahilan why MC 2020-060 was also issued. Also, the same MC requires LGUs to designate and commission reputable funeral service providers to handle the remains of confirmed COVID-19 cases and persons under investigation. By the way, what is the distinction? Baka naman meron pa rin naguguluhan. Di ba merong bagong classification? It's not really bago because this was issued early on pa, maybe April or May. Kapag merong isang tao na symptomatic pero hindi pa siya na-test, ang tawag sa kanya suspect, ang classification sa kanya suspect, di ba? Kapag itong tao na to na symptomatic, by the way, ang symptoms na kailangan ay influenza-like, di ba, yung mga symptoms ng ubo, dry cough, nahirapan paghinga, fever. So ito yung mga influenza-like pananakit ng katawan, kalamnan. These are influenza-like illness symptoms. Or of course, yung severe na, yung ubo, nahirapan huminga, walang nawawala ng panlasa o nawawala ng pangamoy. These are the severe acute respiratory illness syndromes o SARI. Kung hindi pa siya na-test, suspect. Kapag na-test pero wala pang result, probable. And then kung lumabas na yung result at confirm or positive, so confirm. So yun yung classification. Just to remind everyone. So kapag confirmed COVID cases, ang mga biktima o mga namatay, yun yung focus ng ginagawa natin sa MDM. And proactively, LGUs are directed by the DILG to designate ahead of time, kahit wala pang cases na may namatay, pero hindi kailangan hintayin na may namatay bago ipatawag yung mga funeral service providers. It happened kasi in Metro Manila, I think this is in April. Ganon nung nangyari, hindi organized. Biglang tumaas yung number of deaths in one day, in 24 hours, dumami. And at that time, there were only 2 crematoriums that were prepared to handle dead bodies. And typically, it would take 4 hours to completely incinerate one dead body. So, and then they cannot operate 24/7. Kailangan may pahinga yung oven ng mga crematoriums, which means that they can probably just process 5 or 6 dead bodies in a day. So kung 5 bodies in a day times 4 hours, that's 20 hours. And then if there were more than, let's say, 20 or 30 dead bodies, and there were only 2 crematoriums na kayang gumawa nun, and then yung iba karamihan ayaw dahil takot din sila, di ba? Takot din sila ma-expose yung kanilang mga workers doon sa mga COVID-19 victims. So there was no system in place, and bigla na lang nung nandun na yung problema, halos lahat nagkakagulo na. This is what we are trying to, or that we want to avoid by telling LGUs, by directing the LGUs to, as early on, hindi pa man nagkaroon ng ganong problema, kausapin nyo na yung mga funeral service providers, gather them. The other reason for doing this is to ensure na yung presyo ng services will not soar very high. Kasi siyempre may mga ganong prinsipyo sa law of supply and demand. Mataas yung demand, kung konti lang yung mga service providers mo. So it's an opportunity for business to charge higher. Ito ngayong law na gusto natin ipa-repeal sa Congress pero hindi daw kayang i-repeal ng Congress yung law of supply and demand. So to be able to reduce or lessen the possibility of this problem, mas mahalaga, mas importante, mas kailangan unahan ng mga LGUs itong problema na ito. MC 2020-060 also have several specific provisions. Isa-isahin natin yan siguro. Pero what is clear is that ang mga provisions na to are designed or are prescribed to help guide local government units, to help guide disaster response personnel, even funeral service staff, yung mga staff sa mga punerarya, health professionals in the private sector, kasi maraming services during this pandemic that are provided by the private sector, by private hospitals, by private clinics, and even private practicing medical practitioners, and also for bereaved families. Maraming mga namatayan na hindi din nila alam kung anong gagawin, and for those that really care to know, and mga NGOs also that are supporting the bereaved families, andun yung mga kailangan gawin sa provisions ng 2020-063, including the supplementary guidelines. Okay. So DILG and LGUs, since, well, we started developing Operation Listo in 2014, we tested it several times. What we have then was the Operation Listo LGU Disaster Preparedness Manual for hydromet hazards. So pang bagyo, baha, landslide, habagat. Okay, so yung meron tayo nun. Pero dahil sa pandemic, for us to also make sure na standardized yung application no management of the dead all over the place. So if LGUs are leading, if the DILG offices and the LGUs are leading management of the dead at the ground level, it has to be standardized. I mean, the procedure must be the same all over the place. And this is what the Operation Listo manual is all about, being able to prescribe the checklist. The DILG came up with this management of human remains for PUIs and confirmed COVID-19 cases interim manual. Thanks largely to Mr. Robin Lim. Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Sir, apo.
Sige, nawala, naputol ako. Okay. Can we proceed now?
Yes, sir, apo.
Thank you. So again, I was saying, Operation Listo, numpisahan natin yan sa Operation Listo LGU Disaster Preparedness Manual for Hydromet Hazards, na kailangan mas standardize, no? Yung protocols, yung procedure that we need to prescribe and must be adopted by LGUs all over the place. So we use checklists, di ba? Para alam natin, wala tayong mamimiss, wala tayong makakaligtaan doon sa mga must-do actions to prepare for. Ito yung critical, especially the critical preparedness actions part of the Operation Listo Manual. So dahil merong demand, merong pandemic, merong COVID-19 pandemic, kailangan maglabas din ang DILG ng isang listo manual. So ito yung Management of Human Remains for PUIs and Confirmed COVID-19 Cases interim manual. Thanks to Mr. Robin Lim and his very close coordination with the different agencies under the National Task Force, nabuo in such a short time with proper guidance and diligently reviewed yung mga procedures, nabuo itong interim manual na ito. So,
Sir, excuse me po.
yeah.
Apo, nawala din po kasi yung pag-share screen niyo po. If you could just share your screen again.
Sorry.
Apo.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, guys. Do you have my screen now?
Yes, sir. Okay
Okay.
naman po.
Sige. Okay, so okay na tayo doon sa explanation nito slide na to, no, yung interim manual. Okay, let's move on to this. Okay, syempre, nandyan yung, dyan sa interim manual na yan, nandyan pa rin yung mga flowchart at yung checklist. The typical listo, di ba? So I'm sure many, if not all of our participants today are familiar with the Operation Listo manual. And you should, di ba? Itong interim manual na ito is very useful, easy to use for planning and implementing proper management of the remains of PUIs and COVID-19 cases. Halimbawa, hindi pa kayo familiar or you haven't read a copy of the Operation Listo Disaster Preparedness Manual for LGUs, I think in the end of this presentation, at the end of this slide, although I'm not quite sure now, merong nakalagay doon yung URL where you can download a copy of the Operation Listo Manual version 3. And also, you will find there the link where you can also download this interim manual for the management of human remains for PUIs and confirmed COVID-19 cases. So, mga electronic copies lang yon kasi nag-print si Robby ng kopya, naubos na kasi dalawa lang yon, yung isa sa kanya, isa sa akin. Okay, so okay, next. So, also on March 31, I guess, March 31, yeah. The ALG issued a memorandum to all the ALG regional directors, which includes the BARM or Bangsamoro, Minister of Interior and Local Government, asking them to monitor compliance by LGUs to the ALG MC 2020-063 and also help LGUs facilitate the implementation of this memorandum circular. So if you are at the LGU now, baka hindi nyo alam or wala kayong pakialam, you should know that the ALG is monitoring the LGU's compliance of MC 2020-063, including the supplementary guidelines. Okay, the interagency technical working group na nag-review ng MC 2020-063 at yung Department of Health Department Memorandum number 2020-067, they recognized that there were several provisions of these two policies, the ALG and the DOH, which needed to be clarified or needed to be updated or enhanced. Kaya noong April 16, barely 3 weeks after na i-release or napirmahan yung DILG MC 2020-063, na nailabas din ng DOH at ng DILG yung Joint Memorandum Circular on the supplementary guidelines to MC 2020-063. Some of the key features are, yun na nga, yung una, the adoption of the new COVID-19 case classifications, nabanggit ko earlier, the suspect, probable, and confirmed cases. It also clarifies which agencies or who are the persons charged with the duty of burial, the process of disposition of the remains of COVID-19 cases, the cost of burial, the transfer of human remains from one LGU to another or from one place to another, and it also emphasizes a lot on coordination. So these are the new case classifications, di ba, according to DOH. Ito naman yung persons charged with the duty of burial by the order of priority, di ba? So, if the deceased has left no spouse or relatives, pero meron siyang sufficient means to shoulder the necessary expenses, kung ang deceased o yung namatay ay walang relatives o walang spouse, walang next of kin, na may kakayahan na gumastos, then the duty of burial devolves to the LGU. Okay, mahalaga yon kasi maraming ganong kaso. At the onset, noong February, March, April, mas marami yung mga namamatay na mga mayayaman. Di ba? These were the persons na pumunta abroad, tourists, they contracted the disease, they went home, they died. May kaya. Pero some of them, unfortunately, had to be hospitalized for a long period. Yung mga na-hospital na mga isang buwan bago mamatay, I have to tell you, gumastos ng milyon. So it's not easy to, kapag nagkasakit kayo ng COVID-19 at na-hospital kayo at hindi kayo namatay agad, magastos po. Kaya siguro, mabuti na rin yung mamatay na agad para hindi nagagastos ng malaki. Joke. Okay, so, if in the disposition of human remains, kung walang claimants or walang relatives or yung relatives refused to claim the remains, ito naman yung order of priority of disposal. Okay? So if an identified deceased person expired in the city or municipality kung saan siya nakatira at doon siya namatay, yung punong barangay shall exert all efforts to determine the identity at yung address, no, yung kinaroroonan nung next of kin nung mga nung namatay. Okay? And then inform them of the situation at alamin sa kanila, gusto ba nilang ilibing yung biktima, yung namatay sa COVID or PUI, or gusto ba nilang i-cremate? Diba? Ang option on whether to bury or cremate always rests initially or first on the next of kin. Okay? And then, kapag may decision na sila kung ilibing or i-cremate, the local MDM cluster head will then provide or facilitate identified funeral service providers. Bakit yun ang default? Bakit hindi bahala na yung pamilya maghanap ng punerarya? Because una, it will be difficult for them dahil bereaved sila. Meron silang namatay na kamag-anak and they would not know how to properly handle it kasi COVID or PUI sa COVID yung namatay. So, but the government, the local government unit, and specifically the MDM cluster in that LGU, is supposed to be prepared already. Dapat, di ba, meron ng kausap ng mga funeral service providers, alam na ng LGU na na-train na yung personnel ng funeral service provider, and all sorts of critical preparedness have already been done. So, i-recommend ng LGU doon sa next of kin na ito po yung options nyo. Punerarya A, punerarya B, punerarya C. And then, bahala na kayo makipag-usap more specifically on the magkano at ano yung mga arrangements. Okay, so yun yung reason why the LGU must be prepared. Dapat meron na kayong kausap ng mga funeral service providers, meron ng either executive order si mayor or meron ng MOA. I don't know how you will handle it. Depende kay mayor, depende sa council, or depende sa recommendation ng MDM cluster in the LGU. But there has to be that kind of an arrangement, pre-arrangement before the problem comes up. When the problem crops up, katulad ng example natin dito, it is up to the LGU to provide or facilitate burial or cremation through identified funeral service providers. And also provide transport. Di ba? Si LGU ang responsable nun. If an identified deceased person expired in the city or municipality kung saan siya nakatira, the concerned punong barangay shall exert all efforts. Tama ba? Tama ba yung binabasa ko? Okay. Representatives of the local MDM cluster kung saan namatay yung tao shall coordinate with the MDM cluster of the city or municipality kung saan nakatira. Maraming cases kasi na nakasakit yung tao pero walang hospital na doon sa kanilang lugar, bayan or syudad kung saan sila nakatira, walang hospital na appropriate to address COVID. At that point, probably suspect. And then the doctors will say, these are ILI or SARI symptoms. So hindi pwede sa hospital namin dito. We will refer the patient or the case to another hospital in another city. And then, unfortunately, namatay yung pasyente sa ibang syudad. hindi doon sa syudad kung saan siya nakatira. So this will be the case. If that is the case, then yun na nga, yung MDM cluster ng city or municipality kung saan namatay yung biktima, will have to coordinate with the MDM cluster of the city kung saan siya resident. And then, yun na, yung punong barangay nung city kung saan siya nakatira will inform the next of kin. And then yung sinabi ko earlier kanina, the next of kin will be given the option which funeral service provider they can choose, no? And then provide all the other services like transport and also counseling. The local MDM cluster kung saan nakatira yung deceased will provide, facilitate transport and very important because the law PD 853 requires na yung isang tao na namatay due to a communicable disease. Medyo luma kasi yung batas, no? Presidential decree pa yon. So ang term na ginagamit doon is communicable, which is really the same as in infectious, the term that we are using today. So ang requirement ng batas is within 12 hours from the time of death, kailangan mailibing or kailangan ma-cremate yung dead body. So this is something that we really need to work on kasi even in preparing the death certificate, medyo mahabang oras yung nakukonsume at nauubos yung 12 hours na mandato ng batas. This is a fact that every one of us must not forget. Merong 12 hours from the time of death na deadline para ilibing o recremate yung isang tao na namatay due to a communicable or infectious disease. So if the deceased person expired in a city na hindi siya nakatira doon, and yung kanyang family, immediate family or relatives or the next of kin refuse to claim the dead body kasi takot sila, di ba? Takot silang mahawa. They don't know how to handle it. Or for any other means, walang financial resources. They wouldn't know what to do and how. Kailangan yung isang release waiver and quit claim. RD Willie would be able to know this as a student of law. Kailangan ng release waiver and quit claim para maprotektahan naman yung mga government staff and officials that will facilitate the work in favor of or on behalf of the next of kin. So yung claimants, kailangan mag-execute ng special power of attorney. And dito ang LGU ang tutulong, di ba? In many cases na nakikita natin today, mga indigents yung mga families. So even if they were not really indigents, pero dahil mahaba yung hospitalization nung biktima, halos naubos yung kanilang kakayahan, financial resources. So nahihirapan na rin sila. They cannot even afford to hire a lawyer or the services of lawyers. So this is where the LGU should also provide the essential service like pwede naman, meron naman sigurong legal officer or lawyers employed by the LGU that can assist in preparing the special power of attorney. So ito yung isa sa mga pwedeng itulong. Then the to delegate the obligation of the final disposition of the cadaver to the concerned LGU. Ang purpose naman talaga ng SPA na to is really to clarify or to delineate or to to delegate the authority of the next of kin to the LGU. So in a sense, protection ito ng mga LGU. Kaya hindi dapat ipagkait or hindi dapat pahirapan yung pagbibigay ng tulong doon sa mga pamilya na namatayan ng mga legal services. And among these, sabi ko nga, is yung helping the next of kin prepare the special power of attorney. So if the deceased person's next of kin, so ito yung disposition of, disposition procedure for cadavers of Muslims. So if the person died inside a referral facility or hospital, yung issuance ng death certificate at burial shall be done within 12 hours from the time of death. This is a provision of law, so this is something that we cannot just waive, but I will show you how this is being waived in some other cases. But by operation of law, there is a requirement na dapat mailibing or makremate within 12 hours. So it's important, and it is a must, na yung death certificate dapat ma-issue within the 12-hour time limit. Hygiene preparations such as cleaning of the body, tidying of hair, trimming of nails, and shaving, and embalming shall not be allowed. This is also a quotation. This is quoted from the law itself. The cadaver, after proper disinfection, shall be placed in a double bag for burial. Part of standard precaution is to properly dry the dead body, pupunasan, wrap properly in linen, and then ilagay sa isang cadaver bag, and then dalawang cadaver bag. So kaya tinatawag nilang double bag. So hindi pwedeng isa lang. Kung nagtitipid, dapat paghandaan ng LGU ito to have several or a good number of stocks of cadaver bags, especially in addressing infectious dead bodies. No? Kasi yun talaga yung requirement ng batas. And then immediately and within 12 hours, the cadaver shall be transported to the nearest Muslim cemetery with the assistance of an imam who will perform Islamic burial rites. So again, hindi lahat ng LGU merong Muslim cemetery. You have to admit that, and we have seen that. And so it's important na ngayon, wala pang problema, wala pang namatay na Muslim COVID victims sa inyong lugar, pero alam nyo na at nakalagay na sa plano at naihanda nyo na yung pag-transport at yung coordination, remember the word coordination, with the authorities in the LGU where there is a Muslim cemetery. Okay? So again, hindi lahat ng LGU merong Muslim cemetery, but you should know where the nearest Muslim cemetery is. So you need to begin the coordination now. Okay, so the provisions, the protocols are provided doon sa interim manual ng management of human remains for POIs and COVID cases. So go to that, get that document, get that manual, and go through the procedures and the checklists. So if the person outside, so yung dead body na yan ng isang Muslim COVID victim died inside a referral facility or hospital, ganun pa din. Yeah? Yung hygiene preparations such as cleaning the body, tidying of hair, trimming of the nails and shaving and embalming, they are not allowed. Pero meron ng fatwa na inisyu ang Grand Mufti ng Islamic Church sa Pilipinas kung paano yung meron silang meron silang ritual na pinrescribe na, no? So I will not dare describe it kasi although I'm a little bit familiar, but I'm not sure kung paano. But just to inform everyone, meron ng tamang ritual, Muslim burial ritual na pinrescribe ang Grand Mufti ng Islam sa Pilipinas kung paano i-handle ito instead of literally washing the dead body, gugupitan ng kuko. Wala nang ganon kasi dapat walang physical contact, hindi allow yon. Pero instead of doing that, mayroon ng another procedure. So the best thing to do actually is to get in touch with an imam, no, doon sa pinakamalapit na Muslim community, and they will be the ones providing all the necessary religious practices and religious rites. And then yung representatives ng LGU shall proceed to the location of the cadaver and conduct the necessary procedures. So again, I was saying the procedures are listed in the checklist provided in the interim manual. The cadaver shall be wrapped in tightly sealed cloth with double bag. Nabanggit ko na yan. And immediately within 12 hours, the cadaver shall be transported to the nearest Muslim cemetery. Of course, kasama na yung imam who will perform the Islamic rites or burial rites. Okay, this is important, very important. On the cost of burial, as a general rule, di ba, kapag may namatay sa atin, yung gastos, sagot ng nearest kin. Siyempre, kung anak ko yon at ako yung ama, sagot ko lahat yung gastos. Normal yon, di ba? Pero kung yung next of kin is financially incapable, mahirap, or sabi ko nga, we have seen cases na hindi naman sila actually mahirap, but because of the hospitalization, the prolonged hospitalization, and then eventually namatay din yung kanilang kamag-anak, naubos yung kanilang financial resources, and at the point of death, they are financially incapable of defraying the expenses. Or in other cases, yung namatay ay walang next of kin. So in these cases, yung LGU ang mag-shoulder ng burial expenses. Okay? Kung saan, ang tanong, anong LGU ang mag-shoulder nun? Yun ba yung LGU kung saan siya nakatira? Listed as a permanent resident, or LGU kung saan siya namatay? This has been decided, and yung LGU kung saan siya namatay, yun ang initially mag-shoulder ng cost of burial because of the need to be expedient, the need to move fast. So yung LGU kung saan namatay will shoulder the cost of burial initially, subject to reimbursement by the LGU where the dead person held permanent residence. So may mga cases na rin kasi nangyari na yung mga namatay dito sa Metro Manila ay hindi naman taga Metro Manila, but taga probinsya, taga Visayas, or taga Mindanao. And it is really not practical to ask the LGU where the dead person is listed as a permanent resident. It's not practical to ask them to shoulder the cost of burial. So what is practical is that the LGU kung saan namatay ang mag-shoulder ng expenses. Take note, hindi ito ganun kadali because you have to include in your plans and in your budget itong possibility na to na may mga mamamatay ng COVID-19 sa inyong LGU pero hindi ninyo constituent, hindi ninyo resident. But you need to spend or you need to shoulder the cost of burial. So you have to prepare for this, LGUs. And then again, yung cases ng indigent persons. But in the situation ng indigency, just like in any other cases, hindi lang pandemic, kailangan yung determination or certification ng local social welfare office or ng DSWD na itong tao na to ay indigent at walang kakayahan yung kanyang mga kamag-anak na gumastos. So yung cost ng burial automatically by default by law goes to the LGU kasi indigent, di ba? May programa naman ang LGU at ang DSWD to assist indigent persons, indigent families. So if the cost of burial exceeds the cap set by the concerned LGU, sabi ng DBM, ng DBM, DILG, DOLE, DSWD, DAD, TIDOF, Joint Memorandum Circular Number 1, Series of 2020, or yung tinatawag na Special Guidelines on the Provision of Social Amelioration Measures, pwedeng ma-augment ng DSWD yung kung ano yung budget that was originally provided by the LGU for this particular item at naubos na or mauubos na. The LGU will have to request the DSWD for augmentation, and this joint memorandum circular that I am talking about, specifically it's section 7.2.1 authorizes augmentation in excess of the cap or the ceiling provided in or yung meron ng LGU. So in the case of dead person that is not classified as an indigent, pero yung kanyang next of kin are not financially capable at the moment, but is classified as vulnerable or disadvantaged or in a crisis situation. So again, hindi naman indigent yung family, pero at the moment na namatay yung kamag-anak nila ay they're not financially capable, pero nandun sila sa isang lugar na mataas ang cases ng COVID. So they are vulnerable or they are disadvantaged or in a crisis situation. I think that this applies to the entire country now because the entire country is declared by the President to be under the state of emergency. So, based on the assessment of the local social welfare officer, again, yung provisions ng Section 7.2.1 and 7.2.2 of the same joint memorandum circular that I mentioned earlier will apply. Okay, so merong programa, that's the assistance to individuals in crisis situation, or AICS program ng DSWD, where they have provisions to assist families or individuals that are in a crisis situation, as mentioned earlier. And then any cost, any excess cost, shall be defrayed by the kin, but in an agreement to be facilitated by the LGU. May mga situations kasi na the kin is not, upon assessment of the LGU, the kin is not capable of defraying the expenses. So yung LGU will augment kung ano lang yung kaya ng namatayan, ng next of kin. Kung ano yung kulang o kakulangan, kailangan punuan o suportahan o i-augment ng LGU. The LGU also may augment as necessary the cost of burial. So this is again authorized by the same JMC. In the case of dead or deceased persons that are not residents of the LGU kung saan siya namatay, or if yung next of kin niya are financially incapable to defray the cost or the expenses, and if not warranted for transfer to the place of the deceased origin or permanent residence, yung expenses ng burial or cremation shall initially be borne by the LGU kung saan siya namatay, and later will be reimbursed by the LGU kung saan siya permanent resident. So I think this was already iterated earlier. Okay. On the transfer of human remains, itong malaking issue din ito in Metro Manila largely because karamihan naman ng cases ng mga namatay nangyayari dito sa Metro Manila. Pero marami sa mga namatay dito na hindi taga Metro Manila. So there is always the need to prepare to transfer the dead bodies from the places where they died to the places of residence. Kasi marami sa kanila, in fact, majority sa kanila, ayaw ng pamilya na i-cremate. Gusto nila mailibing. So the human remains have to be transferred from Metro Manila. Also, we were successful in repatriating, bringing back to the Philippines, to the country, dead bodies of overseas Filipino workers from Saudi Arabia. Mahigit 200, almost 300 human remains na ng mga OFW natin sa Saudi Arabia ang na-repatriate natin. Although mas marami sa kanila yung namatay of other causes, marami pa rin sa kanila, almost half, namatay because of COVID-19. Diba? Yung mga Muslim OFWs na namatay sa Saudi by religion and by operations of law in Saudi Arabia, they have to be buried immediately. Buried, hindi cremate. Bawal nga sa Muslim yung cremation. But yung mga non-Muslims, our government successfully negotiated with the Saudi Arabia government na wag nilang ilibing because we are doing our best to repatriate or to bring home the dead bodies of Filipino workers pabalik sa Pilipinas. And then that's another story nga. From Saudi, dadalhin dito, so that involves transfer of human remains. Pagdating sa Metro Manila, ayaw ng pamilya na i-cremate, so they have to be flown or shipped to their respective provinces. So as a general rule, no remains of a person who died of dangerous communicable disease shall be transferred from one place to another. This is a quote from PD 853, the Sanitation Code in the Philippines. The body or remains of any person who died of a dangerous communicable disease shall not be carried from place to place. Shall not be carried from place to place except for the purpose of burial or cremation. So, pinagbawal talaga ng batas, ng Sanitation Code, yung pag-transfer ng dead body of a person na namatay because of a communicable disease from one place to another. And it shall be the duty of the local health authorities to cause such transfer or such body to be thoroughly disinfected before being prepared for burial. And then yung bahay or hospital room or furniture or damit and everything capable of conveying or spreading infection shall also be disinfected. Today, nung ginawa itong sanitation code na ito, hindi pa naging practice yung standard precaution at saka transmission-based precaution sa infection prevention and control. But because of the lessons learned at that time, nag-evolve yung infection prevention and control procedures. Kaya today, we are even more careful about ensuring proper disinfection. Okay, next. So on the transfer of, on the issuance of a permit to transfer, kasi nga as a general rule, bawal i-transfer from one place to another. Pero may exceptions. Diba? So kapag applicable or acceptable yung situation or condition, then a permit has to be secured. So yung issuance of the permit to transfer the human remains shall only be granted when absolutely necessary, provided that transfers shall strictly comply with the standard and precaution-based standard and transmission-based precautions and other relevant issuances and requirements for infection prevention and control. And then dapat kapag ongoing na yung pag-transfer, nakalagay na sa isang funeral car or whatever vehicle yung kabaong, yung dead body that is properly wrapped, sealed, dapat wala nang stopover. Diba? From point A to point B, dire-diretso. Except, syempre, kung mayroong emergency, kung nasiraan yung sasakyan, force majeure. Or kung halimbawang dumaan sa checkpoint, so kailangan huminto sa checkpoint. So take note, may checkpoints. Bawat LGU, iba-iba yung protocol for managing COVID-19, di ba? Which is why we have local COVID-19 task forces. So iba-iba. Iba-iba din yung condition, iba-iba yung infection rate, and so on and so forth. So may mga checkpoints sa border, mostly. So pagdating sa border, parahin yung sasakyan, inspeksyonin, ano makikita? May kabaong, may patay. The person in charge of that action, the transfer of the human remains of a COVID-19 case, shall ensure that all documents for travel are already secured beforehand, that are already obtained early on. And yung copy ng mga permit na yon, yung death certificate na yon, etc., dapat may kopya yung driver at saka yung documenter para kapag na para sila sa checkpoint, hindi na sila magtatagal doon because they will be able to present the documents. You have to make sure of this kasi may mga nangyaring transfer of human remains na COVID cases na hindi nila dala yung documents. May mga documents, pero they did not care about or think about having these documents in their possession, lalo na yung driver or yung kasama ng pamilya na nag-escort ng katawan ng kanilang kamag-anak na namatay sa COVID. They did not care or bother to bring with them copies of the permit, of the death certificate. So pagdating sa checkpoint, naging problema at nagtagal. And in a few cases, nag-exceed doon sa timeline o sa deadline na 12 hours. So nagiging problem ito, which is why we're talking about this now dahil dapat kasama na yan sa protocol ng LGU to make sure that these documents are already secured beforehand before moving or transferring the human remains from one point to another. So on prior coordination, again, the word coordination, di ba? Halimbawang by land yung movement. So galing sa LGU-A papunta sa LGU-H, meron siyang dadaan ng LGU-B, C, D, E, F, G. Dapat alam ng LGU-A kung ano yung mga protocol ng mga LGUs na dadaanan. So some of them will not even bother to perform a thorough check. Diba? And mostly ito yung mga cases kung saan yung highway, merong highway, dadaan ka sa teritoryo pero hindi naman actually papasok doon sa poblasyon. So hindi mahigpit, tuloy-tuloy lang yung takbo. But there are also LGUs na pagpasok mo from the highway, you will drive directly to the center of the town. Diba? So expectedly may mga checkpoints dyan at maghihigpit sila. So ito yung mga documents na dapat ihanda. Certified true copy of the death certificate, transfer permit, secured from the local health officer of the point of origin, kung saan manggagaling yung dead body. And kailangan ding i-secure yung transfer permit sa mga LGUs na dadaanan where requirement. Diba, kung requirement ng LGU na yung LGU BCDEH, kailangan nila ng they require the permit, so dapat ma-secure na rin yon. And other documents that appropriate government agencies might require. In this specific case, yung Joint Task Force COVID Shield, which is the Joint Task Force composed of the Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces, the Bureau of Fire, and the Philippine Coast Guard. Ito yung madalas na tumatao doon sa mga checkpoints. And kaya nang sinabi ko, because LGUs have different protocols in their borders, in their respective borders, iba-iba din yung mga documents na kinakailangan nila. So you have to make sure that you coordinate properly with the LGUs na dadaanan when you plan to transfer the remains or the dead body of a COVID victim from one place to another. You need to plan ahead, you coordinate ahead para when you perform the transfer itself, seamless. Okay, all regional and local MDM clusters shall establish the protocols and mechanisms on coordination, monitoring, and reporting. So here we are again. The word coordination. Alam nyo, in everything that we do, especially in DRRM, especially in crisis management, emergency management, and even in the office, even in our respective offices, we only need to coordinate. We need to communicate, we need to cooperate, so we coordinate. Parang sabi ng iba, triple C, 3C. Pero pag sinabi mong coordinate kasi, nandun na sa coordinate yung communicate and cooperate. Because you cannot effectively coordinate if you don't talk, if you don't communicate. Communication is a two-way process, remember? So, kung ikaw din nagsasalita pero hindi sumasagot yung kausap mo, you're not coordinating. Di ba? Kung you communicate, you talk to each other, but one party is not cooperating, but in fact obstructing, then that is not also coordination. That is also an impediment to proper coordination. So it has to be very clear. Kaya mahalagang nagko-coordinate yung regional MDM cluster, yung local MDM clusters, and then meron na dapat protocols and mechanisms. And it's not difficult to do it right now because we already have the interim manual for management of PUIs and confirmed COVID-19 cases. So yung minimum to do actions are already prescribed. Kailangan na lang sigurong dagdagan in the situation where kailangan gawin pero wala pa siya doon sa interim manual. And please inform Codex kung meron kayong additional because we also intend, just like the LGU Disaster Preparedness Manual, yung unang Operation Listo manuals natin, we also intend to improve the interim manual for the management of human remains of PUIs and COVID-19 cases. So kailangan namin ng feedback kung ano yung inyong nakitang dapat isama doon sa interim manual na yan. So this manual can continue to evolve and become better and better. The next is hospitals, through a designated point person, shall immediately inform the nearest kin of the deceased, or actually and the local MDM cluster focal person of the city of residence. Mahalaga ito kasi nakita din natin experience dito sa Metro Manila where sobrang busy ng hospital. Walang focal person charged with informing the government, informing the city government na, oy, may namatay dito sa hospital namin and either this is a confirmed COVID case or this is a suspect COVID case. Dahil sobrang busy nila. And this is also one of the reasons why nadidelay yung pag-issue ng death certificate. Diba? So it's important and it is prescribed in the Joint Memorandum Circular, the supplementary guidelines, kailangan, required, ang mga hospitals mag-designate ng isang focal person na ang gagawin niya, ang main responsibility niya is to inform not only the next of kin or the nearest kin, but also to inform the LGU through the local MDM cluster. Kasi ang default dito sa NCR and in other places that we have already coordinated with, ang LGU designates also the MDM cluster head sa DRRM office as the focal person. So, ang nag-uusap na lang yung hospital focal person at saka yung MDM focal person sa LGU, sa DREAM-O. And so, yung coordination process na yon has to be established kahit wala pang case na may namatay. Diba? Kasi mahalagang nandun na yung coordination system na yon or mechanism so that whenever the case arises, wala nang gulo, hindi na nagkakaturuan kung sinong gagawa or more importantly, na-address agad kung ano may yung kailangan gawin. In the event that the cadaver has not been claimed or picked within 6 hours doon sa hospital, from the time of death, kailangan i-inform ng hospital focal person kaagad yung pinakamalapit na DILG office. So nagre-react yung mga taga-DILG, lalo na sa LGU. Bakit sa amin? Again, we're not going to physically handle the dead body. No way. But you need to be informed because you need to coordinate. You need to inform higher offices. You need to coordinate with other agencies para ma-actionan na kaagad yung brewing situation doon sa hospital. Diba? Merong isang suspect or probable COVID-19 case na namatay, hindi pa kinuha ng punerarya or ng kung sino man, yung kamag-anak. So after 6 hours, kung walang nag-claim, dapat i-inform ng hospital focal person ang pinakamalapit na DILG. Okay, so yung hospital focal person, dalawa na yung na-establish dito na link na dapat niyang i-establish. Una, yung link niya sa LGU. Pangalawa, yung link niya sa nearest DILG office. Okay? And then, in the event the cadaver has not been claimed or picked up for the past 12 hours, the hospital, through the designated focal person, shall report the presence of the unclaimed body to the city or municipal government. Actually, this is not, you don't have to wait for the 12 hours. Yung 6 hours, ito na yung sapat na time for the focal person sa hospital to inform not only the DILG office but also the LGU. Si DILG naman, ang default pagka nalaman niya, tatawag din siya sa LGU. LGU, yung team natin, i-activate na, puntahan natin to, pick upin natin to, dalhin natin doon or gawin natin ito. Depende kung ano yung plan that has already been established or prepared by the LGU to address an incident or an event like that. So this is just prescribed to make sure that the LGU is also responsible to handle that particular situation or a case of an unclaimed dead body from a suspect, probable or confirmed COVID-19 case. Kaya nilagay siya doon sa joint MC. But in reality, hindi kailangang hintayin ng 12 hours because yung first 6 hours na requirement, pwede nang gawin agad ng hospital focal person yung coordination with the DILG and the LGU. Okay. This is again very important. Kapag may emergency, who you gonna call? Hindi Ghostbuster, 911. Pero in the cases of LGUs, mas gusto ng taong bayan na yung local government ang magpo-provide ng hotline. And then again, ang 911 is not handling only COVID-19 cases. They're handling a lot of other emergencies, diba? Life and death situations. And magiging burden sa kanila kung pati yung COVID cases na local ay itatawag pa sa 911. So it's very important for the LGU to establish its own COVID-19 hotline. Pwede rin siyang gamitin, hindi lang pag-report na may namatay dito sa bahay, ang mga symptoms niya ganito, and then hindi namin alam pa paano i-handle ito. Pwede rin gamitin yung hotline na yun to report persons or somebody in your family, in your household na nagkasakit and manifesting influenza-like symptoms. And hindi nyo alam kung paano i-handle yun, di ba? So you call the local hotline. Although meron ding telemed hotlines na piniprescribe or nire-recommend ang Department of Health, which will be received by doctors and medical practitioners who can immediately provide proper medical guide or attention to callers. No? Pero LGUs are really enjoined to provide a hotline. Pwedeng cellphone number yan, sabihin text lang, walang call. So people naman will appreciate kahit text lang. We saw this in Marawi when the Battle of Marawi was was going on, and the ARMM government at that time gave out, I think, 2 or 3 cell phone numbers, and then informed the people in the entire region, hindi lang sa Marawi, of those numbers. And then thousands upon thousands of text messages were coming in, and from those messages, nakukuha yung information about what's going on, what's happening, and what to expect next. So ganon din yung idea for this COVID-19 hotline na kailangang i-provide ng LGU. Sorry. There was also a question, or there were a few queries about mga next of kin inquiring if they can exhume the remains of relatives, of their relatives who died either as a suspect or confirmed COVID-19 case. So nag-issue ang DILG noong May 2, 2020 ng isang advisory which was intended to clarify the issue by reiterating again the provisions of the IRR of the Sanitation Code, IRR ng PD 853, that exhumation of human remains shall be allowed only after 3 years kung non-communicable disease, and after the lapse of 5 years kung ang kinamatay ay communicable disease. Diba? And sinasabi doon, exemptions are permitted within a shorter time in special cases. Kung halimbawang merong specific request ang court, ang police, or an agent of the NBI medical legal officer or for medical legal cases. Pero itong special exemptions na to that will be granted in these situations to these particular officers are subject to the approval of the regional director of the Department of Health. So hindi siya automatic. Again, meron kasing mga few cases that we heard about na hindi pa siya tested, hindi pa na-test, namatay, inilibing, and then may mga dumating yung mga next of kin from abroad, from other places, and then some of them were asking, dapat na-test natin. So ipa-exhume natin. Di ba habang hindi pa totally nabubulok yung katawan? It's not allowed. Exhumation will only be allowed at least dahil hindi pa naman established na communicable disease yun, di ba? So at least in this particular provision of law, Chapter 21 of PD 856, at least 3 years after na nailibing. And pwede lang special cases kapag ini-request ng court, ng police, ng NBI, and subject to the approval of the DOH regional director. So during this pandemic, hundreds of our citizens, mostly yun ang nabanggit ko kanina, overseas Filipino workers, died while working or living abroad. Initially, in February, in March, in April, and even in May. Marami tayong mga kababayan na may kaya. Went abroad, turista, or just, vacationing. And then they went home to the country. Some of them knew that they had COVID. They had infected some influenza-like illness. So pagdating nila dito, most of them went to the care of doctors, hospitals, but some of them did not. Many of our Filipino kababayans who worked abroad, who have been working abroad for a long time, also contracted the disease and namatay din sila abroad. Okay? So, kaya nang nabanggit ko kanina, ang Department of Labor and Employment, specifically yung Overseas Workers Welfare Administration at saka yung Philippine Overseas Employees Administration, yung Department of Foreign Affairs, tayo sa DILG, yung Department of National Defense, yung Department of Health, and other national government agencies, pati na yung mga private organizations, private companies, we worked together since June up to, ang pinaka-recent was September 29 that I know of. We have been working together to repatriate almost 300 human remains of Filipino overseas workers na namatay sa Saudi Arabia for one reason or another. But in many cases, COVID-19 ang kinamatay. And there was a dire need to bring them home para mabigyan ng proper burial or proper cremation and magkaroon ng closure yung families nila that are here in the Philippines. So noong July 1, 2020, dahil nga very specific naman yung provision ng batas ng Sanitation Code and its IRR, the IATF deemed it important and necessary that the Bureau of Quarantine issue the guidelines kung paano, ano yung proseso para tanggapin, di ba? Many if not all of those cases ng mga namatay na OFW sa Saudi, namatay more than 24 hours before they were shipped here to the Philippines. In fact, ng mga initial batch, merong mga namatay doon 2 buwan na nasa freezer before we actually repatriated them back to the country. So, yung provision ng batas na kailangan within 12 hours after the time of death, from the time of death, kailangan may libing, hindi na talaga siya ma-fulfill. And because of that situation, the IATF directed our task force, our task group, to come up with the procedure and for BOQ to issue the guidelines for the admission of human remains to the Philippines. So naglabas ang BOQ noong July 1 ng kanilang Memorandum Circular number 2020-023 or the interim guidelines for the admission of human remains into the Philippines. This MC provides the general guidelines for the admission into the Philippines of the remains of OFWs na namatay of different causes, various causes, hindi lang COVID-19. Kasi because we do not know of the particular situation kung paano namatay itong mga to. There were some na namatay because of other illnesses. There were some na namatay because of vehicular accidents, di ba? Pero hindi natin alam from the time of death hanggang sa nadala sila sa hospital or nadala sa morgue and then eventually consequently frozen if the dead bodies were at any time exposed to COVID-19. So the default was to treat all dead bodies, kahit hindi determined na COVID case, to treat all dead bodies, human remains, as COVID cases. Diba? So that way, standard yung protocols na kailangang sundin at hindi special. Kasi kapag natural causes, on a normal day, ganito yung proseso. On the same day, kapag COVID case, iba naman yung proseso. So to ensure standard and transmission-based precautions are observed, we have to treat all cases like COVID. Then it is notable also that in this circular, itong MC ng BOQ 2020-023, yung mandatory 12-hour from the time of death requirement for burial or cremation has been adjusted, okay, to conform to the needs of the time. The idea really is not to defy the law because there is no point following the law when at the time that we receive the human remains from Saudi, naglapse na yung 12 hours or yung 24-hour requirement ng law. So, kailangan lang siyang gawa ng sistema para practicable yung pag-manage ng human remains na yon. So, this is really done because of the needs and without compromising infection prevention and control procedures. So, dahil sa pangangailangan, kailangan gawin. And so far naman, wala pang nagko-question whether formally or informally or even in court, itong ginawa ng BOQ, which is actually implementing an order from the Interagency Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases. Okay, so let's talk about briefly about the methods of transport by order of the highest to the lowest level of public health safety. So best, and we are encouraging this, especially if this is not prohibited in the religion or culture of the involved person or the dead person, cremate. So sa cremation, ashes shall be placed in a polyurethane bag, parang plastic siya na makapal, and ilagay sa loob ng isang urn. Okay? So the procedures for doing this is already established. There's no need to be very particular for us kasi meron namang mga funeral service providers that will be doing this. We also know that all over the country, hindi ganun kadami yung mga funeraria na mayroong crematorium. So ang default pa din ng karamihan is libing. And common problem among LGUs is kakulangan ng espasyo sa sementeryo. Lalo na yung mga maliliit na mga munisipyo, maliliit lang din yung kanilang lote na ginagawang public cemetery. So may mga technique na ginawa yung iba nating mga LGU. Ginagawa nila yung tinatawag nilang condominium or apartment type, yung mga 3 or 5 level na structure where in one stretch merong 10 and then merong 5 layers going up. So that particular space na if you measure it sa lupa, maliit lang siya, but you can actually contain or provide enough burial spaces for up to 50. Diba? And it also serves as a wall or a divider of one section of the cemetery with another section. So depende sa design na gagawin ng LGU doon. But it's really one way of maximizing utilization of limited space for the cemetery. It's also important to note that the WHO, PAHO, and even the DOH guidelines indicate or are very specific na yung dead body of a person who died from COVID-19 because of SARS-CoV-2 is no longer infectious. Okay? So hindi dapat katakutan na ililibing siya doon at baka naman yung mga dadalaw doon ay magkakaroon din ng COVID. No. If proper standard precautions are followed from the time of death up to the time na ilagay sa isang cadaver bag hanggang sa nailagay sa isang kabaong hanggang sa mailibing. If standard precautions and transmission-based precautions are properly observed, wala pa po tayong alam na case in the Philippines and even abroad because we are also monitoring situations in other countries through the support of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Wala pang na-communicate sa atin na case where nagkaroon ng infection because of the mishandling of dead bodies due to COVID-19. Yung pangalawang method of transport is embalming. And of course, yung pangatlo were instances where cremation or embalming is not allowed. So we have to ensure that the human remains should be wrapped in cloth soaked in disinfectant. Technically, yung sodium, ano to? Ano yung ginagamit sa yung sodium, yung bleach. Okay, so yan lang yung ginagamit actually na 1% solution ng bleach with water. Yan lang yung hanggang ngayon, strangely, yan lang yung piniprescribe na disinfectant because there are so many types of commercial disinfectants and even the US EPA has already certified hundreds of commercial disinfectants in the US na pwedeng or certified na nakaka-deactivate ng SARS-CoV-2. But in the country, here in the Philippines, we are still using the bleach solution, a solution of bleach o yung hindi ito commercial, yung Zonrox as sodium hypochloride. Okay? So yung sodium hypochloride, which is what 1% of sodium hypochloride to 99% water, yung minimum na composition. So i-disinfect yung cloth nakabasa, no, babad sa sodium hypochlorite solution, and ilalagay yun sa isang hermetically sealed cadaver bags. By the way, we noticed upon very close inspection, and I also did it once, yung cadaver bag kung saan nilagay yung dead body from Saudi, of course yung tinignan namin, yung alam namin hindi COVID, no? Hindi siya hermetically sealed. Pero dahil maganda yung quality, inaamoy-amoy nga namin, hindi naman mabaho. So it's really perfectly done. Although we noticed na hindi siya hermetically sealed kasi makikita mo yung body bag, if you're familiar, kapag sinara mo na yon at nilapat mo na yon, para siyang naka-tape. The moment na in-open mo siya, hindi mo na rin siya may sasara ulit, diba? Pero pag sinara mo siya, talagang totally sealed siya. So, but in some cases, alam namin na medyo dinadaya tayo ng mga funeral service providers ng Saudi. Diba? China-charge tayo sa presyo ng hermetically sealed coffins and bags. Pero in reality, hindi naman. But in our case, we have to make sure that the dead bodies are properly wrapped in clothes, clothes soaked in sodium hypochlorite solution, and placed in hermetically sealed cadaver bags, and then consequently placed in hermetically sealed coffins. So yung BOQ, Bureau of Quarantine MC na yan, nakalagay doon, cremation shall be the preferred method of handling the remains upon arrival in the Philippines. So ginawa natin, even prior to the arrival, even prior to the shipment of the human remains from Saudi, inaalam na natin dito kung sino-sino, ano-ano yung mga cases, sino-sino at ano-ano yung mga cause of death, para masiguro natin na yung mga COVID cases, beforehand makausap na yung next of kin, and we will be able to convince them to authorize cremation. So OWA was very good at providing incentives, like sila na yung gagastos sa cremation, which is not under normal circumstances an obligation of government. Pero if the person, the OFW who died because of COVID, is a member of good standing ng OWA, then may program ang OWA na sagot nila lahat yung mga ganong klaseng benefits. So sagot nila yung cremation, yung shipment of the remains o yung ashes in the urn from the crematorium to the next of kin. So lahat gastos ng OWA. Aside from the fact na meron pang financial assistance na ipoprovide ang OWA mismo doon sa next of kin. So cremation became a default, and this is also the preferred method according to the Bureau of Quarantine. By the way, Bureau of Quarantine is one of the attached agencies of the Department of Health. So marami sa kanila, or karamihan, if not all of them, are doctors and medical practitioners as well. So the requirement lang is that kailangan alam ng next of kin na yun ang gagawin at papayag ang next of kin na i-cremate. Diba? So, and that the cremation, according to this BOQ circular, the cremation has to be done within 24 hours from the time that the quarantine clearance is issued by the BOQ. So mayroong bagong benchmark, yung death certificate, pagdating ng dead body dito, yung death certificate nung dead person na yon na galing sa Saudi, tatatakan ng BOQ ng date at saka isusulat yung time, kung anong oras na ibigay yung quarantine clearance. Of course, this is after due process inspection, etc. And yun yung benchmark mo, so that within 24 hours, so meaning the following day, dapat makremate or mailibing na yung human remains na yan. Burial shall be allowed as well, provided that the following conditions are strictly met. So, although cremation is preferred, but of course, like I said, konti lang naman ang crematorium sa Pilipinas, and in most cases, Filipinos would want to bury their dead, not to cremate them. So burial is allowed, according to the Bureau of Quarantine in this particular MC, provided that human remains shall be buried within 24 hours from the issuance of the quarantine clearance, like I said. And then the manipulation of the remains and public viewing shall not be allowed. What do you mean by manipulation of human remains? Ibig sabihin, pagdating nung bangkay na yon, nakabalot na siya ng cloth soaked in disinfectants, nakalagay na siya sa double bag, hermetically sealed, nakalagay na sa coffin, hermetically sealed. Pagdating sa bahay, doon sa next of kin, hindi na pwedeng buksan yung kabaong, hindi na pwedeng buksan yung cadaver bag. No manipulation whatsoever, especially dissecting or autopsy or embalmment. It's prohibited. And public viewing also of the dead body itself is not allowed. Kung nakalagay na siya sa kabaong, yun na yun. And kung hindi pa nauubos o may time pa before the 24-hour deadline, depende sa LGU. Sabi ng isang mayor that I talked to, sabi niya, sir, pagdating sa teritoryo namin, sa checkpoint, inaamoy-amoy namin yan. Pag hindi naman mabaho, okay, tuloy yan sa bahay ng kanyang mga kamag-anak. Pero kapag amoy namin yan, mabaho yan, diretso na yan sa sementeryo. Hindi na yan pwedeng dalhin kung saan-saan. And it's correct because lalo na kung COVID yung ikinamatay noon at hindi pumayag yung family na i-cremate dito sa Metro Manila, so the human remains were transported to their respective towns. And then pagdating doon, although I have not actually read or received any report na may ganong case, but the mayor was saying, kung may ganong situation, sir, hindi na namin ipapadala sa bahay nung kamag-anak. Idediretso na namin sa sementeryo. Nakahanda na kami. So this is the same thing that we are telling LGUs now to prepare for this kind of eventualities, not only to prepare for dead Filipinos coming from abroad, but also dead Filipinos who died from other places in the country that will be brought home for proper disposition, for burial especially. So you should prepare for this eventuality. Merong mga ganong proseso sa checkpoint. Nakahanda na yung apartment doon sa cementerio. There are people who are tasked to do these things. And then the BOQMC also requires that only adult members of the family of the deceased OFW or overseas Filipino shall be permitted to attend the funeral. This is because the WHO has recommended or has actually prescribed or informed the world na yung 20 years old or younger and then yung 60 years old and older are more susceptible to the disease, the virus rather. They're more susceptible to the virus. Pero hindi sila, in many cases, they are not symptomatic. So they appear to be perfectly healthy, pero they are carriers. Diba? So, and again, like I said, kapag may gathering, binabawal natin yan, yung mga bata, the younger persons, 20 and younger, dito yung mga cases na pinakamarami ang asymptomatic pero positive. And because many of them are not tested because they're not symptomatic, so hindi mo malalaman. And then if they're allowed to join gatherings, even small gatherings, that's an opportunity to super spread the virus. So only adult members are allowed. And of course, yung close members of the family. And then yung transfer of human remains are allowed, provided that or follow strictly the provisions of the DILG-DOH Joint Memorandum Circular, yung pinag-usapan natin kaninang suppletory guidelines. And no permit shall be granted for the further transfer of human remains outside of the stated place of burial. So kapag nag-apply ng isang permit to transfer or transport the human remains, kung ano yung point of destination, hindi na pwedeng pagdating doon, ay, ililipat na naman pala doon sa kabilang LGU. Hindi na ina-allow ng BOQ. Primarily because of the 24-hour prescription, in-extend na nga. Di ba? Sobra-sobra na nga yung time na kailangan dapat ma-dispose na yun, living or cremate. So, all the more na mahigpit at mahalaga na planuhin mabuti yung pag-transfer ng human remains. Dapat hindi nagbabago-bago yung desisyon. So, in this particular circular, it's not allowed. Permits to retransfer or to transfer the dead body from point B to point C, it's not allowed. So yung OWA, they are required or mandated to directly and properly turn over the remains, yung human remains, or the cremains, the ashes, to the next of kin. So there are few things here. Dapat identified na beforehand yung next of kin, contact information, address. So DILG, what we did was to coordinate with our DILG field offices, and the field offices of DILG coordinates with the LGU to inform the mayor, to inform the proper authorities at the LGU level na parating itong OFW na ito na namatay sa Saudi, and we need to monitor. Una, at the early stage, we were tasked by the IATF to help secure the consent of the next of kin to agree to sign a waiver or a certificate or notice of consent that they agree that their dead relative will be cremated or has to be cremated. But later on, we purposely requested Dole na mas mahalaga, mas maganda kung si OWA na lang mismo ang kausap ng next of kin. Because when we were doing this kind of support to the DOLE, particularly to OWA, maraming tanong yung mga next of kin na hindi din masasagot ng DILG. So it places the DILG and the LGU in a situation na mukhang imbis na makatulong ay parang additional layer, no? Parang bureaucratic layer pa siya. So we requested OWA to please release the ILG and the LGU from helping convince the family to sign the consent. Instead, we will just help facilitate and ensure na na-observe naman yung proper prevention, infection prevention and control mechanisms that are already prescribed. So ang OWA na ang bahala doon, yung transfer, yung proper turnover of the remains or the cremains, and yung families, diba, sa management of the dead. Earlier, we are saying, and I will keep on saying this, everything that we do in the management of the dead is not only for the dead. It's really about the bereaved families. It's really about the surviving members of the family of the dead victim of the disaster. So ito yung kailangan asikasuhin ng OWA. Meron silang financial assistance na ipoprovide. Binabawasan drastically, significantly ng OWA yung trabaho, yung responsibility ng mga next of kin by doing everything, almost everything for the bereaved families. And then maghihintay na lang yung next of kin sa bahay nila, but they are constantly being informed by the OWA officer na ganito na yung situation hanggang sa makarating ma-receive na nila either the human remains in coffins or the ashes in urns. Of course, everything here has to also follow relevant guidelines and protocols of the DILG, the management of the dead and missing person cluster, and the NDRs. So these are just some of the basahin, no? Masyado itong detalyado, but I'm sure you'll be provided, if you want, copies of this presentation, so you do this in detail. Pero you better get a copy na lang of the BOQ MC 2020-023, which actually lists down all of these. So ito yung mga procedure before ito yung nangyayari, ito yung ginagawa yung sa airport sa Pilipinas, and then from the airport there's a very solemn, very quick ceremony. In many occasions, we allowed next of kin to join us in the welcome ceremony for heroes because we treat our Filipino overseas workers as heroes. They're one of the actually number one or number two contributor to our economy. So and then their working abroad we treat it as their own sacrifice for the country and for their families. So nung namatay sila abroad, the least that the government could do was to afford them this simple and solemn ceremony, to honor them and to honor also their next of kin for doing the sacrifice also for the country. So ito yung mga procedures, and let's not belabor that now. Okay, so we're almost done. The point of doing all of this, the point of doing management of the dead and missing persons, everything that we do, in fact, in disaster response is coordination. When you manage, you need to coordinate. When you manage, you communicate, you cooperate, and therefore you coordinate. So you communicate, cooperate, coordinate. In one sentence, in one phrase, we always say coordination is the essence of management. So that will be all for now. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know if I have been able to explain clearly kasi alam ko napuputol tayo minsan, but I hope you're still here.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much po sa actually very thorough discussion po siya. Ang dami po naming natutunan po talaga.
Thank you.
Yes, but thank you. So,
And I'm open to questions if we have any questions.
yes, sir. So, for questions po, please do not hesitate na i-type po sa ating chat box yung inyong mga katanungan for clarifications, as well po yung sa ating mga viewers sa ating YouTube channel. Kung may mga katanungan po kayo, meron naman po kaming nagsusubaybay po doon, nakaantabay po sa inyong questions. So, while you formulate po yung mga katanungan, habang nag-iisip po kayo ng mga pwede nyong itanong, let us first have a few announcements po. So, for the information of everyone, we will be providing din po sa ating LGUs, sa lahat po ng province, city, and municipality ng Mimaropa, we will be providing 5 cadaver bags po per LGU. And para naman din po sa DILG provincial office natin, we will be providing naman 5 sets of complete PPEs. So sa PPEs po na ito, para malaman din po natin how to properly use this, let us watch this video on the proper donning and doffing of PPEs.
First, gather all the necessary PPE items beforehand. Key components of personal protective equipment include fluid-resistant or impermeable gowns, N95 respirator, full eye protection, either as goggles or full face shield, and gloves. In circumstances in which there may be uncontrolled splashes or environmental contamination with biological fluids such as blood, head covering and shoe covering will be used. Wear scrub suit. If shoe cover needs to be used, wear them over closed shoes. Put on impermeable gown. Fully cover torso from neck to knees. Arms to end of wrists and wrap around the back. Fasten in back of neck and waist. Cup the respirator in your hand with the nose piece at the fingertip. Position the respirator under your chin with the nose piece up. Pull the top strap over your head, resting it high at the top of the metal nose piece. Pull the bottom strap over your head and position it around the neck below the ears. Place fingertips of both hands at the top of the metal nose piece. Mold the nose piece to the shape of your nose by pushing it inward while moving your fingertips down both sides of the nose piece. Perform a fit check. Place both hands completely over the respirator. For positive pressure seal check, the respirator will slightly bulge if you exhale greatly. For negative pressure seal check, the respirator will slightly collapse if you inhale greatly. Position goggles over eyes and secure to the head using the earpieces or headband. Adjust to fit comfortably. Put on at this time the head cover if you have concern for splashing fluids. Insert hand into gloves. Extend gloves over isolation gown cuffs. Use double gloves if doing any strenuous activity, such as carrying a patient, handling a dead body, or tasks in which contact the blood and body fluids are anticipated. If an impermeable gown is not available, and you expect to undertake any strenuous activity, such as carrying a patient, or tasks in which contact with blood and body fluids, place waterproof apron over gown. While wearing PPE, avoid touching or adjusting PPE. Remove gloves if they become torn or damaged. Change gloves between patients. Perform hand hygiene before putting on new gloves. Remove the most heavily contaminated items first. Be careful to avoid any contact between the soiled items and any area of the face or non-intact skin when taking off PPE. If wearing the apron, peel it off and dispose of safely. If wearing overshoes, remove them with your gloves still on. Touch the highest part of the shoe cover behind ankle. Remove gown and gloves and fasten ties. Peel gown away from neck and shoulder. Turn gown inside out fold or roll into bundle. Perform hand hygiene. If wearing a head cover, remove it from behind the head. Remove face shields or goggles from behind the head. Lift it away from your face. Place eye protection in a separate container for reprocessing. Remove the respirator from behind the head. When removing the respirator, lift the bottom strap first and the top strap next. Perform hand hygiene.
Ayan, so napanood po natin no, yung video po from the Department of Health on the proper donning and doffing ng ating mga PPEs. So kung makikita po natin talagang very meticulous yung process natin when donning and doffing, particularly sa doffing para naman po ma-prevent din natin ang spread or ang contamination sa ating sarili. So for now po, open po ang ating chat box para po sa inyong mga katanungan if you have questions and clarifications na gustong i-voice out. Ayan, so far po wala pong katanungan, no? I can only assume na kaya po walang mga tanong is because our participants really understood yung discussion po natin kanina.
Usually, two things lang yan eh. The reason why the audience will not ask any question is either very comprehensive yung presentation and understood by everyone, or wala talaga silang naintindihan kaya hindi nila may tatanong. At nahihiyang sabihin, pwede bang ulitin mo? So it took us what? More than an hour, 2 hours to do it. So, well, we will still be open to questions in case, not even after this session, because pwede namang ipadala sa Codex yung mga tanong, and we will do our best to be able to answer the questions, and maybe the LG Maropa can find a way to post the answers somewhere. Alam ko meron kayong website at pwede namang ayusin natin yun, ilagay doon. And this will form part of the materials, the resource materials of the DILG Maropa. And thanks again. Kung wala na talagang tanong, maybe pwede na akong mabitawan.
Sir, I believe naman po na yung former po yung reason kung bakit wala silang katanungan, na they really understood. Pero sa ating participants po, if you have questions po, pwede po kayong mag-unmute para naman po mas mabilis nyo pong maitatanong yung mga gusto nyo pong itanong. Anyone po?
Okay, while waiting for anyone to answer, dagdag ko lang, no? Kasi nabanggit kanina ni RD Willie Soyko na ang Philippines is very proud because we are leading countries in the Asia Pacific region. And I say this in all honesty because I attended 2 international workshops last year. One was held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the other in Bangkok, Thailand. And this was through the auspices of the International Committee of the Red Cross. It was participated by representatives from 32 or 33 countries within the Asia Pacific region. Ibig sabihin yung mga countries that borders around the Pacific, and which includes the United States and Canada. So alam natin, nalaman ng ICRC that the Philippines is the only nation in the Asia Pacific region which has a system. Ang tawag ng ICRC, an end-to-end system for managing the dead and missing persons during disasters. So yung binanggit natin na search and retrieval, disaster victim identification, management of missing persons, proper disposition of the dead, and then yung management of bereaved families. And many of these countries were particularly impressed that in the Philippines, hindi lang yung searching for missing persons, which will eventually turn out to have died, and then identifying the bones or the remains, and then notifying the next of kin na ito yung inyong kamag-anak na nawala after this disaster, na ngayon hinahanap namin yung mga remains and identified. It's not really just about the forensic part of it, but really taking care of the bereaved families. So this is one thing that the Philippines is very proud of. And this is because our NDRMC, our DRRM system in the country has started adapting management of the dead and missing since after we experienced Yolanda, and we have continuously evolved. So it's very important for us Filipinos to be proud of this fact, and which is why also dito sa COVID-19 pandemic na ito, I have already shared it to some of my friends abroad, especially in Southeast Asia, yung ating interim manual for management of PUIs, human remains of PUIs and COVID-19 cases. I've shared this to some of my friends in other countries in ASEAN. And they're also quite impressed because wala pa silang ganon. And at least Malaysia has informed me na ginagamit nila as guide yung ating ding interim manual for COVID-19 cases. So it's something that we should be very proud of, because we are leading many other countries in this particular type of disaster response. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, napakaganda po pala talaga, no? I think we can associate din po ito sa close family ties talaga ng Filipinos, na we give importance po, yun nga po, nabanggit nyo kanina, for the bereaved family din talaga itong sa ating management of the dead and missing. Ayan. Opo, si Sir Lyndon Plantilla po ay meron daw pong katanungan. Sir, you can unmute po.
Okay. Good morning, Director Alan. How are you?
Good morning, Sir Lyndon, sir. Long time no see.
Yes, sir. Sir, para dun po sa mga non-LGU na gaya namin na entities, when it comes to the counting of body counts, can you linawin lang po ninyo kung ilan, ano nasusunod pagdating sa counting, kung ilan yung ating mga casualties, and then ano bang ba kung pag sinabi ba ng governor yun ay final pagdating sa taas sa ating sa inyo at saka doon sa OCD, ano po ang masusunod po in terms of pong announcement?
Yes, thank you, Sir Lyndon. Okay, ganito po yung practice ngayon. Because of very particular reminders from the National Privacy Commission to make sure na hindi mababiolate yung privacy ng mga individuals, that the families or next of kin of COVID victims, very centralized yung data management ng mga casualties ng COVID-19. So again, I'll go back. Merong classification, may suspect cases, and suspect cases are individuals that manifests or have manifested ILI or SARI symptoms but have not yet been tested, and then namatay. Okay, so either in the hospital or referral facilities, isolation centers, or at home. So that's one classification, one type. The other is probable cases where individuals manifested symptoms and were tested for COVID. So when we say test, this is RT-PCR, because in NDM we don't recognize any other types of tests, like especially yung rapid antibody test that became controversial some time ago. So probable cases are individuals which have manifested SARI or ILI symptoms and have been tested, but the results have not yet been released, or the test procedure has not yet been completed, and then the case died. Okay, so namatay either ganun na rin, sa hospital or referral facility, isolation center, or at home. So probable case. And of course, most of the cases that we see, actually all of the cases that we see, and is reflected in the DOH reports daily, yung number of dead. These are all COVID-19 confirmed cases. Okay, so when DOH reports at 4 p.m. every day that this are the number of confirmed cases that died today. So yung mga cases na report na yun, these are confirmed COVID-19 cases. Hindi po kasama dyan, again, ulitin ko, hindi kasama dyan yung probable at yung suspect cases. So if you ask me, is it correct? Is it right to do that? Yes, because when DOH reports these numbers, these statistics, these are evidence-based. May mga case history and may laboratory results, test results that clearly indicates without any question, because this is done using RT-PCR, that these persons died because of COVID-19. Mas mahirap kung isasama nila sa report now yung suspect at saka probable, especially suspect cases, because these are not tested. And then there will be no basis to say or basis to claim na ito kasama yan sa mga biktima ng COVID-19 pandemic, di ba? Now, itong probable cases, there are already discussions, very serious discussions about finding other means of proving or defending or justifying that these dead victims are actually confirmed COVID cases or could have been confirmed if the results actually before namatay. So kahit namatay na, after a few days, lumabas din yung result. Kapag confirmed naman, dinadagdag din siya doon sa confirmed. So naaalis, natatanggal siya doon sa probable. The moment lumabas yung test result sa mga probable cases and it turned out positive, isasama yung numero na yon doon sa nire-report ng DOH na confirmed. Kapag negative naman, tatanggalin na siya doon sa probable. But because this is not reported publicly, walang hassle, walang gulo. Diba? So I think, and this is not within my purview, this is not within the purview of the MDM cluster to authorize the release of this information. I think this is one of the reasons why the DOH is contented with keeping this internally. Hindi lang naman within DOH. This information is also shared with other agencies. But this is not included in the reported number of deaths. Okay, ulitin ko yung number of deaths, ito yung mga confirmed COVID-19 cases. Again, when they say, halimbawa, kahapon, 53 ang nadagdag sa mga namatay ngayong araw na to, it doesn't really mean that yung 53 died on the same day. Because, sabi ko nga, in some instances, yung lumabas na results kahapon, actually namatay 2-3 days or 1 week ago. Pero kahapon lang lumabas yung result and positive. So isasama siya doon sa mga confirmed cases kahapon. Okay, so if you, sometimes you see, ay 100 plus yung namatay, ang dami naman. Di ba, nadagdag doon sa total deaths. And then you will, siyempre, you will assume, lahat yung namatay kahapon, yung 100 plus na yun. But in some instances, they did not. Some of those confirmed cases actually died days ago, pero hindi pa lumabas yung confirmed, yung test results nila na confirmed sila na COVID, at lumabas lang nung araw na yon, kaya doon lang sa araw na yon isinama. So yung suspect cases lang talaga ang medyo mahirap i-handle. I mean, it's not really mahirap if it's not being released publicly, but this is something that the DOH and other agencies are finding it difficult to justify or even consider as COVID cases kasi nga symptoms lang naman ang na-manifest at hindi pa sila na-test and then namatay na. In a few cases, and I'm sure you know this already, may mga namatay na test na lang after na sila namatay. So, hours or, within 24 hours after they have died, nagawa ng paraan na matest itong suspect case na ito. And if eventually nag-positive, then isasama din yon doon sa confirmed cases na i-report ng DOH. So I hope I'm able to explain quite clearly. Sir Lindan. Sir, naka-mute.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sir Lindan.
Thank
Any more
you po.
questions?
Yes po, Director. Meron po from NAPSI, VDC, from Ms. Aida Orteliano. So, ang question niya daw po is, na-mention niyo daw po na when a COVID person died, virus will also never exist. Meaning mawawala na rin po yung virus. The only thing that burial wake is not allowed is because of the possible gathering that will cause crowd joining together. How about naman daw po if the family will just do the wake for their own dead within the family circle only? Is it allowed even just for a day or two? Thank you daw po for the clarification.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, can you hear me?
Sir, opo.
Okay, sige. Kasi lumabas sa akin dito, unstable connection. Anyway, thank you, Ma'am Aida. Ganito po yung situation. Generally, yung isang dead body of a person who died because of COVID-19, so confirmed COVID-19 case, kapag patay na siya at kapag nasunod yung proper infection prevention and control procedures, kapag nailagay na siya sa isang kabaong, yung kabaong mismo hindi siya infectious kasi dumaan yan sa several layers, several methods of disinfection. So kahit hawakan mo yung kabaong, walang fomites doon. Supposed to be kasi we presume na yung practice ng proper standard and transmission-based precautions have been done or met. Okay. So in the family, I was saying, hindi yung dead body ang infectious. Kasi nga, nandun na yung infection prevention and control procedures. If you allow wakes and people outside of the family circle, yung sinasabi nyo, when you say family circle, I would understand it to mean na yung mga nakatira sa household ninyo. When you say yung tatay or yung lolo or yung uncle or auntie na nakatira sa ibang household is part of the family circle, I will not say yes. Because I understand family circle as, the members of your family that lives within the same household. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kahit kamag-anak nyo siya, kahit uncle, auntie, lolo, lola, nung namatay, pero nakatira sa ibang bahay, dinidiscourage po natin na pumunta sila doon sa inyong bahay kung saan temporarily nakalagak yung dead body. Again, I say temporarily because very specific ang batas, within 12 hours from the time of death dapat mailibing. If this is the case of overseas Filipinos na ni-repatriate natin dito, within 24 hours from the date and time that the quarantine clearance has been issued. So, beyond that, illegal po yon. And the state, the LGU, will exercise its power, its authority to ensure the proper burial or cremation of the dead body. Okay, so there's a legal line there. I will not dare to cross that. Although so far naman walang challenge. Ang inyong tanong is about infection. If you're sure and you have to guarantee this to yourself kasi pamilya ninyo yung involved or yung pamilya ng namatay na tao ang involved. They all have to make sure na walang somebody from another household na papasok sa kanilang bahay. Diba? Because these are the suspected carriers or spreaders. That's the term colloquially used, the spreaders. So by avoiding the holding of gatherings, yung sinasabi nilang dapat limited sa 10, dapat limited sa 5, it's very relative because depende naman yun sa laki ng area kung saan magko-converge yung tao. If it's like a basketball court, you have 5 and they're spread 2-3 meters apart, and it's open air. It's not an air-conditioned facility. Then it's really relatively safe, diba? Especially if they're also wearing masks and even face shields. Pero if you say even 10 or 20 in a basketball court, can still maintain proper distance. But if it's just a small house and you say you allow 10 kasi yun ang nasa regulation ng barangay, not more than 10, so we will fill it up with 10. Pero literally yung 10 na yun ay nagkakadikit na, parang isang dangkal na lang from each other. Then it's really a no. Because the point of the whole thing is that we discourage people to gather, especially people coming from, you'll never know that they are spreaders or they have the virus with them. Diba? So to ensure that we're able to stem or prevent the transmission, we simply just have to discourage this. This is not for the government's sake. This is for the sake of the people that are involved. Diba? Hindi ito para sa mga kapitbahay or sa mga ibang kamag-anak that are coming from. And of course, make pakiramay virtually. And we have done this. I have a close friend whose husband, a police officer, died recently because of COVID-19. And being a close friend, I was one of those that she confided with in her times of sorrow, in the grieving hours. And although she was under stress kasi yung mga kamag-anak ng husband niya, yung parents, yung mga kapatid, really want to come. And, yung lamay, yung traditional na Filipino way. But she was asking for my advice, and I gave her, of course, my best professional advice. And this is one thing that she had to suffer most sa kanya yung kamag-anak because hindi nila naintindihan kung bakit. So I recommended that she set up a Zoom meeting, and then they the immediate family, the children, nag-set sila ng oras, one in the morning, one in the late afternoon, where all of their family members, relatives that are living outside of that particular house can actually join in, and there's a free discussion. So after nagawa yon, naging maayos na. I mean, kahit paano naintindihan na rin nila. This is the thing that we need to do, and we discourage people from converging. Hindi dahil natatakot tayo na ma-infected sila nung patay, because the chances are nil at that point in time. But really, what we're avoiding is the gathering of people where we don't know if these persons that are coming together or coming after another, one after the other, will be the ones actually spreading the virus. Salamat po.
Thank you, sir. We also have a question po from our viewer sa YouTube, si Sir Felix Echevarria Jr. In our coordination po with DOH, do we have information po if they already issued publications or manual na explains on how to manage missing and dead persons to be used as guide daw po ng all responders?
Yeah, yung missing persons as a result of natural disasters, it's ongoing. Putting together the materials, actually hindi lang for natural disasters, but even for human-induced disasters. We actually encountered this as one of the concerns as a result of the Marawi crisis. May maraming missing persons, and we had to work closely with the ICRC and the regional government of ARMM to be able to come up with the standard protocols for managing missing persons. So hindi pa po yan na i-release. We are actually we're supposed to finish that work this year. Kaya lang I have to admit natabunan siya or na palitan ng priority because of this COVID crisis that we are attending to right now. Pero hindi po yan nawawala. We will continue to complete the field guide. Importante ito kasi yun nga, unang-una hindi alam ng marami na meron na tayong sistema. That's one. The other is that non-government organizations that has this advocacy for helping bereaved families of persons that are missing as a result of disasters. And sila yung tumutulong, nagbibigay ng either legal or humanitarian, whatever form of humanitarian assistance to the bereaved families. And siyempre, kung nakikita nilang wala naman masyadong nangyayari, wala silang physical na nakikitang mga government agencies na talagang naghahanap physically. Diba? So they get to question or they get to criticize government for not doing anything or for doing less than what is, according to them, necessary. So we have actually brought some of these groups together with us, and we have started to work on the standard procedures, the protocols. Pero hindi po yan natatapos. But we will push for the completion of that, at least, again, in the concept of Operation Listo manuals. We're putting up something similar to that para kahit paano yung minimum to do actions will be very clear to everyone, not only for LGUs, but also for NGOs, CSOs, and specifically, particularly, to bereaved family members. So, salamat po sa reminder. Ginagawa na po natin, pero hindi pa po siya tapos, and we will continue to do so as soon as the opportunity arises again. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. And may follow-up lang din po si Ma'am Aida. nasabi niya lang din po na thank you daw po kasi na based on her experience daw po, namatay daw po yung kanyang cousin last month. And yun nga daw po, from the hospital, the family was not given a chance to see the body na kasi diretso na pong dinala sa crematorium to be cremated. So thank you daw po for the information.
Ma'am Aida, I will not say this to defend the hospital authorities or the LGUs, but the law requires that any person who died because of dangerous communicable diseases must be cremated or buried within 12 hours from the time of death. So, alam ng hospital authorities kung anong oras namatay yung inyong kamag-anak, and it could have been na kailangan nilang habulin para hindi sila magiging liable for violating the law. The law specifically is the Sanitation Code of the Philippines, and you can read it out for yourself. And this is, I think, one of the greatest predicaments of hospital authorities to comply with the 12-hour requirement. Diba? So, siguro naman, maintindihan din ninyo at ang iba pa natin mga kababayan that are faced with a similar situation, na kailangan talagang gawin, lalo na kung pwede namang i-cremate, payag naman ng pamilya, hindi naman bawal sa relihiyon nung namatay, na i-cremate. This is in order to protect you, to protect the families of the dead person. So, idasal na lang natin. Everything naman after a person dies or has demised, hindi na natin pwede habulin pa na sana nagkaroon mala ako ng chance. That's tradition, that's culture, I understand that. But in a case like this pandemic, it's better to protect the living than to ensure that we continue to practice our traditions. So thank you, ma'am, for understanding. I have met hundreds of hospital authorities, and none of them was saying, madali lang yan, kaya nating i-release yan, at kaya namin i-issue agad yung death certificate and all of those things. They actually see the 12-hour limit as very restrictive. And I said, well, it's not something that we can address now because Congress has to amend that. But it's something that we should take note if ever hospital authorities, epidemiologists will even recommend extending it kasi nakita naman nila baka may reason sila to tell our legislators na hindi naman ganun ka delikado. So maybe it can really be extended beyond the 12 hours. But right now it's the law, and the law has to prevail. Salamat po.
Thank you, sir. We also have another question po from Nia Mimaropa from Sir Renmark Watiwat. Question niya lang din po, paano daw po kapag yung patient ay dinala sa hospital, but unfortunately, hindi na daw po umabot. So, dead on arrival po. Required pa din daw po bang i-check kung positive sa COVID?
It's not a requirement. Actually, we have also encountered or read reports similar to this situation. Depende yon sa next of kin. Okay, I know hospital authorities will not require it as long as depende kasi yon sa symptoms, no? Everything is really symptom based. Kapag hindi pa na-test yung isang tao, kung ang symptoms niya ay symptoms na katulad ng flu o yung tinatawag nilang ILI, influenza-like illness symptoms, or severe acute respiratory illness symptoms, yung loss of taste, loss of smell, etc., aside from the usual dry cough, fever, difficulty of breathing, kapag ganun ang symptoms, then it's similar to COVID. So kapag namatay, bago dumating sa hospital, sa bahay lang or nasa isolation, ligtas COVID center, hindi pa siya na-test, ito nga yung tinatawag nating suspect cases. It's not required to be tested. But we have seen cases where family members themselves asked, pwede bang ma-test pa yan bago ilibing or bago i-cremate? So nangyayari po yan. May mga natitest, and then yun na nga yung sinabi ko kanina kay Sir Lyndon in his question about ano ba yung proper reporting ng dead. Nagiging suspect cases sila, so hindi sila kasama sa nire-report. Pero kahit namatay na, bago kinremate, tinest muna, and then after 2 or 3 days, after na nakremate na yung dead body, lumabas yung result positive. So kapag nag-positive, idadagdag siya doon sa mga confirmed cases. But in the case of the families, it's not required. So if you cannot afford a test, which is a little bit expensive, if you're, hindi naman, at saka patay na eh, is there really a need to do all of these things? So, but it's important for the authorities and the family themselves to understand na dahil hindi nga confirmed na COVID case, pero yung manifestation niya, yung symptom niya ay parang symptoms ng COVID, then the case has to be treated as if it is COVID. Di ba? Para maprotektahan lahat. Hindi lang yung mga medical personnel that attends to the victim, but also the family. More importantly, the family. So it has to be treated like as if it's a COVID case. So yung standard precautions, transmission-based precautions, this is to be particularly observed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So far po wala naman na pong ibang questions both sa ating chat box and pati na rin po sa YouTube. Ayan. Other questions po? Alright. Before we go sa atin pong administrative announcements, meron din pong gustong sabihin po ang ating regional focal person, Miss Sydney Behasa.
Maraming salamat, Rayan. And thank you, Sir Director Alan, for marami po sa ating chat box na nag-express ng pasasalamat for your comprehensive and very clear presentation. Sir, as rin po siguro as an information, dahil po marami pa rin sa mga areas natin dito sa Mimaropa, wala pong kuryente pa, sir. Kaya po nagplan po kami, sir, na i-arrange yung asynchronous learning dito sa ating discussion. So we are planning, sir, kung marami pang magjo-join dun sa ating asynchronous discussion via our YouTube channel, maybe we can invite you, sir, again for a 1 hour to 2 hour open forum para naman po, sir, doon, para maka-engage din po kayo, sir, ng ating mga participants na magpa-participate dun sa ating YouTube channel. Asynchronous session po, sir. So we will just, kung fit din, sir, sa schedule niyo po, we will do the necessary coordination din po. Maraming salamat, sir.
Yeah. First, hi, Sydney.
Thanks,
Long time no see. Anyway, yes, I will be very willing. I am always willing to help, especially because this is already our advocacy. Management of the dead and missing persons as a result of disasters has been my advocacy since we first started developing the system, the cluster, and implementing the protocols for MDM, and even spreading the news all over the Asia Pacific about what we have in the Philippines. So I will not say no. I will always say yes. Now the limitation is of course schedule. Kasi yun nga, ito yung na-discover natin dito sa panahon na to ng pandemic. Napakadali na lang palang mag-video teleconference. And as a result of that, you don't really have to travel from one venue to another venue to attend meetings, di ba? So ang nangyayari tuloy, nagiging super efficient lahat. So I often have 4 or 5 meetings in a day. And usually it starts at 8:30 and ends at 9 or 10 in the evening. And even on weekends, and even on holidays. So please, nandiyan naman si Sir Robin Lim. Robin knows actually my schedule. So he can help you arrange for a schedule that, mutually acceptable to us para makatulong naman ako, at I will continue to be able to support the efforts of the DILG Regional Office, especially DILG Mimaropa, in helping our LGUs and the public learn more about the proper practice of the management of the dead and missing.
Maraming salamat, Director Alan.
Thank you too, Sydney. Ingat.
Yan. So update lang din po, wala na pong further questions sa ating both platforms, both sa Zoom and sa YouTube. So with that po, once again, Director Tabel, thank you so much po for this activity natin sa inyong very comprehensive discussion as said nga po ng ating mga participants.
Yes, maraming salamat din ulit for the invitation. Actually, I consider this coming from RD really. This is an honor and my privilege to be invited here to be able to share the things that I know about management of the dead, the things that we practice in MDM, especially in this very challenging times of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, napaka-importante sa akin itong activity ginagawa ninyo because from my point of view, your DILG Mimaropa is actually helping, spread the word. You're actually helping me help the LGUs. So this is a very good collaboration that we're doing now. And like I said, it's a privilege for me to be invited by Director Willie Soyko to be your resource person today. And it's also the same feeling of importance and honor that Mr. Robin Lim has also been invited to discuss the other techniques or strategies of disaster response. And this one will be talking about EOC and another very important topic. So again, like Sydney was telling me earlier, it is my honor and I will be coming back in as a resource person in any of your webinars or activities that will discuss management of the dead. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Stay safe.
Thank you, sir. And nag-chat din po si Director Suiko. More power to you daw po, sir.
Yes, sir. More power. And stay safe, sir. Stay healthy. Kayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Yes po. So, we also have a concern po. This is administrative side naman po. We have a concern po yung sa ating attendance link. Yes po, we will be posting again yung attendance link because it will also be used for the timeout po natin for today. So, now for some announcements po, of course, part nga rin po ng ating information dissemination or sa ating efforts na makapacitate ay ang pag-stream po natin sa YouTube because we want na kung meron po tayong medyo nakakalimutan na po or may ilang parts po nitong ating activity na medyo naghina po yung internet connection at medyo hindi po ninyo narinig yung part na yun, you can always go back po doon sa ating YouTube channel. So, it's actually DILG Mimaropa LGCDD channel. So, just go there and you can watch po yung ating activity din. So, of course, would like to request din po na i-like and subscribe nyo po yung ating channel to be updated din sa ating more capacity development. And we will be posting din po, yun nga, once again, yung ating attendance link dito po for your time in and time out for today. So, ayan po, it's already been posted. So, just click po yung ating link. We will also be providing the link of the ating materials para naman po ma-access nyo po yung mga discussion points po for today and tomorrow as well. So, for our activity tomorrow, we will begin po at 8 a.m. So, that's the part 2 po ng ating activity. And our speaker for tomorrow is, of course, Sir Robin Lim. Yan. So once again po, thank you po and we'll see you tomorrow.